You believe your home is a sanctuary until you unlock the door and find someone else living your life inside. The most terrifying detail was not the strange car in the driveway, but the familiar smile waiting behind the door. She called it helping, but I called it intrusion, forgery, and theft. However, the twist that truly froze my blood was that this nightmare did not start in the kitchen. It began years ago. My name is Hazel Cooper, and for the last 365 days, I had been existing in a state of suspended animation. I was 35 years old, yet my joints felt weathered by a decade more than that, worn down by the friction of constant travel and high-stakes corporate negotiation. As a project operations manager for the Hawthorne Meridian Group, a massive consultancy firm specializing in medical supply chains, I had spent the last year living out of suitcases in sterile hotel rooms across 3 different continents. I had orchestrated the movement of surgical robotics through customs in Southeast Asia and mitigated distribution crises in Eastern Europe. All while suppressing my own desperate need for stability. The contract was finally over. The exit interview was done. I had 2 weeks of absolute, glorious nothingness stretching out before me before I had to even think about updating my resume or answering another email marked urgent. I did not want to see a spreadsheet. I did not want to hear the ping of a notification. I wanted silence. I wanted the smell of pine needles baking in the sun and the sound of the little river rushing over stones. I steered my sensible gray sedan off the highway and onto the winding 2-lane roads that led toward Townsend, Tennessee. This was the quiet side of the Smoky Mountains, far removed from the neon chaos of the tourist traps further north. The tension that had been coiled tight at the base of my neck for 12 months began to loosen, loop by loop, with every mile marker I passed. This cabin was my sanctuary. It was the one tangible thing my grandmother had left me, purchased with the modest inheritance she had hoarded away in coffee cans and savings bonds. It was not a mansion, it was a retreat. It was the place I went to remember who I was when I was not being Hazel Cooper, the fix-it woman for Hawthorne Meridian. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy of trees, dappling the asphalt in shifting patterns of gold and shadow. I rolled the window down, letting the humidity and the scent of damp earth fill the car. I had been dreaming of this moment since I boarded my flight in Frankfurt 18 hours ago. I had fantasized about the specific routine I would execute upon arrival. First, I would unlock the heavy front door. Second, I would open every window to air out the mustiness of a house that had been closed up for a year. Third, I would pour a glass of wine and sit on the back deck to watch the fireflies start their evening dance. That fantasy shattered the moment I rounded the final bend in the gravel road that led to my property line. The gate was open. My foot hovered over the brake pedal, my heart skipping a violent beat. It was a sturdy, rough-hewn wooden gate secured by a heavy-duty padlock. I was the only person who possessed a key. I was meticulous about security, a trait that served me well in my profession and was absolute law in my personal life. I distinctly remembered locking it the morning I left for the airport a year ago. I remembered the satisfying click of the shackle snapping shut and the way I had tugged on it twice to be certain. Now, the gate was swung wide, pressed back into the encroaching weeds as if it had been that way for a long time. Logic tried to intervene. Perhaps the utility company had needed emergency access. Maybe a storm had somehow damaged the latch. But as I eased the car through the opening, the gravel crunching loudly under my tires, the pit in my stomach deepened. The tire tracks in the dirt were fresh and numerous. This was not a one-time entry. This was a thoroughfare. I crested the small hill that revealed the cabin, and the breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. There was a car parked in my spot. It was not a utility truck or a police cruiser. It was a sleek black SUV, polished to a mirror shine that looked ridiculous against the rustic backdrop of the woods. I knew that car. I knew the vanity plate frame that read, "Boss Babe" in glittering rhinestones. Kara. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. Kara Whitmore, my younger sister. the serial entrepreneur whose ventures usually lasted exactly as long as the initial investment capital held out. Kara, who floated through life on a cloud of unearned optimism and left a trail of financial wreckage for everyone else to sweep up. What was she doing here? She lived in Atlanta, or at least she had the last time we spoke, which was brief and transactional. She had asked for a loan for a boutique candle business. I had said no. We had not spoken since. I parked my sedan next to her SUV. The contrast between the two vehicles striking. Mine was covered in road dust and practical. Hers was a leased statement piece intended to project a success she had never actually achieved. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, the silence of the woods rushing in to replace the hum of the motor. I felt a prickle of irritation, hot and sharp, rising in my chest. I had wanted solitude. Instead, I had an ambush. I stepped out of the car, slamming the door harder than necessary. I marched toward the house, my boots thudding against the packed earth. I was prepared to have a quick, firm conversation. I would ask her how she got in, presumably. She had picked the lock or broken a window, which would be another bill I had to pay, and then I would tell her she had to leave. I was too tired for her drama. I was too drained for her latest pitch. But as I approached the porch, my irritation curdled into confusion. The cabin did not look like the place I had left. The rough, natural wood steps I loved were swept clean, which was expected, but there was a new doormat. It was not the sturdy rubber mud scraper I had bought at the hardware store. It was a coarse choir mat with cursive script painted on it. It looked like something from a suburban home goods store. I looked up. Hanging from the wooden beam above the porch was a fern in a macrame hanger. I hated ferns. They died if I looked at them wrong. And next to the door, nailed directly into the cedar siding I had painstakingly stained myself 3 years ago, was a small, rustic chic wooden chalkboard sign. It read, "Welcome, y'all." I stared at it, blinking. The phrase was aggressively hospitable, utterly unlike me, and bizarrely performative. It looked like a prop. It looked like the entrance to a themed bed and breakfast, not a private residence. I reached into my purse, my fingers closing around the cold metal of my house key. I was going to march in there and demand an explanation for the vandalism of my siding. I stepped up to the door, jamming the key toward the lock, but the key never touched the metal. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy thunk from the inside. The door swung open, and there she was. Kara stood in the doorway, framed by the soft, golden light of the interior. She looked infuriatingly healthy. Her hair was highlighted and blown out in loose waves, her skin glowing with the kind of tan that required either a tropical vacation or an expensive spray. She was wearing a cashmere lounge set in a soft oatmeal color that probably cost more than my round-trip flight. In her hand, she held a ceramic mug. My mug. It was a handmade piece I had bought from a local potter in Townsend 5 years ago. A beautiful, imperfect thing glazed in deep blues and greens. I treated that mug like a relic. I hand-washed it. I never let guests use it. And now, Kara was cradling it casually against her chest, the steam curling up around her manicured fingers. She smiled. It was not a sheepish smile. It was not the smile of someone caught trespassing. It was a warm, welcoming, benevolent smile, as if she were the hostess, and I were the guest who had arrived a little too early for the party. "Hazel," she said, her voice smooth and bright, "you are home earlier than I thought." I stood frozen on the doormat, my key still clenched in my hand like a useless weapon. The cognitive dissonance was deafening. She was acting as if this were normal. She was acting as if she belonged here, occupying the space so fully that I felt like the intruder. "Kara," I managed to say, my voice raspy from hours of silence in the car. "What is going on? How did you get in here?" She took a sip from my mug, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, don't worry about the boring details right now. You look exhausted. Seriously, Hayes, you look like you haven't slept in a week. Come inside." She stepped back, ushering me in with a sweep of her arm. I crossed the threshold, and the smell hit me first. My cabin usually smelled of cedar, old paper, and the distinct, crisp scent of the mountains. Now, it smelled like a department store perfume counter. Vanilla, sandalwood, something floral and cloying that stuck to the back of my throat. I walked into the living room and stopped dead. "Where is my rug?" I asked, looking at the bare floor where my grandmother's braided rug had been. "Oh, that dusty old thing," Kara said, closing the front door behind me. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt final, like the closing of a cell. I stored it in the shed. It was a trip hazard, and honestly, it smelled like a wet dog. "Look, I brightened things up a bit." I looked around, my eyes darting from one violation to the next. The mantel over the stone fireplace, which I kept bare except for a single piece of driftwood, was now cluttered. There were framed photos lined up across it, photos of Kara. Kara on a beach, Kara laughing with friends I did not know, Kara holding a glass of champagne. There was not a single picture of me, or our grandmother, or anything that connected this house to its history. On the coffee table, a stack of glossy magazines fanned out artistically architectural digests, fashion tabloids, wedding planners. Beside them sat a half-open cardboard box with a shipping label. I squinted at it. It was addressed to Kara Whitmore. This was not the debris of a weekend crash pad. You do not redecorate for a weekend. You do not ship packages to a house you are squatting in for 2 days. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with a reality I was struggling to process. The way she moved through the space was terrifyingly fluid. She walked to the sofa, my leather sofa, now draped in a chunky knit throw blanket I had never seen before, and sat down, curling her legs under her. "I am just settling back in," she said, the words floating in the air. "Settling back in," I repeated, turning to face her. My project manager brain was trying to assemble the data points, trying to find the logic in the chaos. "Kara, I have been gone for 12 months. I told you I would be unreachable. I did not give you a key. I did not give you permission to be here." She waved a hand dismissively, the gesture infuriatingly patronizing. I know. You are always so rigid with the rules, but I needed a place to land. My lease in Atlanta ended, and the universe was telling me I needed a reset, and you were not using the place. It was just sitting here, gathering dust. It seemed wasteful. So you broke in." "I borrowed a spare key from Mom," she said, blowing on her coffee. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course, Mom, who never said no to Kara, who enabled every disastrous decision in the name of keeping the peace. I had given Mom an emergency key with strict instructions that it was for life or death situations, only fire, flood, or blood. "I want you to pack," I said, opening my eyes. My voice was steady, but it vibrated with a low frequency of rage. "I am here for 2 weeks. I need to be alone. You can stay tonight if you really have nowhere to go, but you are leaving tomorrow morning." Kara looked at me, her expression shifting from welcoming to something slightly pitying. She set the mug down on the coffee table without a coaster. "Hazel, honey," she said softly, "you are being dramatic. We can share. It is a big house." "It is my house," I snapped. "And you are not a guest. You are trespassing." "I am not trespassing," she said, her voice dropping the sweetness and taking on a defensive edge. "I am family, and I am helping. You have no idea how much work I have done around here." I looked around the room again. The alien throw pillows, the generic art prints leaning against the wall, waiting to be hung, the delivery boxes in the corner. "How long, Kara?" I asked. The question felt heavy in my mouth. She hesitated. For a split second, her eyes darted to the left, a tell she had had since we were children. "A while," she mumbled. "Define a while," I demanded. She sighed, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. "I don't know. A few months." The words hit me like a physical blow. A few months. I did the math instantly. If she had been here a few months, she had not come here because of a sudden crisis in Atlanta last week. She had moved in almost immediately after I left the country. She had known the cabin would be empty. She had known I would be on the other side of the world, too busy with time zones and supply chains to check the security cameras I had been meaning to upgrade. This was not a crash landing. This was an occupation. "You have been living here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You moved in." "I am watching the place for you," she insisted, her volume rising. "Houses fall apart if no one lives in them. I am keeping the pipes from freezing. I am watering the plants. You should be thanking me." She stood up then, smoothing down her expensive lounge pants. She looked at me with a strange mixture of defiance and excitement, like a child who had broken a vase but glued it back together and was waiting to be praised for the repair job. "Actually," she said, a new energy entering her voice, "since you are here, you have to see what I did with the back of the house. You are going to freak out. In a good way." "I do not want to see anything," I said. "I want my keys." "Just come," she said, walking past me toward the kitchen hallway. She did not even look back to see if I was following. She moved with the confidence of someone who owned the floorboards beneath her feet. "I was going to surprise you when you got back, but since you are here early, well, just wait until you see the kitchen." I stood alone in the living room for a moment. The silence of the mountain was gone, replaced by the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Kara's footsteps echoing on the hardwood. My sanctuary had been breached. The safety I had driven hundreds of miles to find had been dissolved before I even stepped through the door. A cold feeling started at the base of my spine. It was not just anger. Anger was hot. This was something else. This was the chilling realization that the person standing in my kitchen, wearing my sister's face, had not just taken up space. She had taken over. I looked at the delivery box on the floor again. I stepped closer and read the label. It was from a high-end electronics retailer. The date on the shipping label was from 3 months ago. She had been here for at least 90 days. 90 days of sleeping in my bed. 90 days of using my utilities. 90 days of playing house in a life she did not build and did not pay for. "Hazel," Kara called out from the kitchen, her voice singing with a twisted sort of pride. "Come on, you are missing the big reveal." I gripped the strap of my purse tighter, my fingernails digging into the leather. I did not want to go into the kitchen. I wanted to turn around, get back in my car, and drive until I found a lawyer. But the pull of the horror was too strong. I needed to see the extent of the damage. I needed to see exactly what she meant by work. I took a breath that tasted of vanilla air freshener and betrayal, and I followed her down the hall. I had no idea that the kitchen was just the surface. I had no idea that the real rot went much, much deeper than a coat of paint or a new set of cabinets. I was walking toward a cliff edge, and Kara was standing there, smiling, waiting to show me the view. I stepped across the threshold into the kitchen and felt the ground beneath me lurch, a sensation akin to missing the bottom step in the dark. My brain struggled to reconcile the geography of the room with the memory imprinted on my soul. This was the northeast corner of the cabin. This was where the morning sun used to hit the knotty pine cabinets my grandfather had installed by hand in the 70s. This was where the smell of old wood and bacon grease had lingered for decades. A scent that meant safety and family. That room no longer existed. In its place was a blinding, sterile white box that looked less like a mountain retreat and more like the operating theater of a cosmetic surgeon. Kara released my arm and spun around in the center of the room, her arms wide in a gesture of triumphant presentation. She looked like a game show model showcasing the grand prize, utterly oblivious to the fact that she had just detonated a bomb in the center of my life. "Ta-da!" she squealed, the sound bouncing sharply off the hard surfaces. I know. It is a lot to take in, but just breathe it in. Hazel, isn't it breathtaking I finally got rid of that depressing dungeon vibe?" I could not speak. My eyes were trying to find a single anchor, one familiar object to tell me I was still in my own house. There was none. The warm, honey-colored pine was gone, likely ripped out and thrown into a dumpster. In its place stood rows of high-gloss white cabinetry that reached all the way to the ceiling. topped with crown molding that looked ridiculous in a rustic A-frame. The countertops, once a charmingly scarred butcher block, were now a slab of gray-veined quartz that felt cold enough to preserve a body. The lighting was aggressive. The soft yellow glow of the old pendant light had been replaced by a geometric chandelier that looked like an exploding star, casting harsh, clinical shadows across the floor. Even the floor was different. The wide plank oak was covered by large, slate-colored tiles that made the room feel industrial. "I call this mountain modern," Kara chirped, running her hand lovingly along the edge of the quartz island. "It opens up the space so much. I felt like the wood was just suffocating us. You know? It was so heavy, so dated." I took a step forward, my boots clicking loudly on the new tile. I felt a physical ache in my chest, a hollowness where my memories used to be. Those pine cabinets had scratches on the lower doors from when I was 7 years old and learning to ride a bike indoors on a rainy day. The butcher block had a burn mark from the time Grandma set a hot skillet down without a trivet. Those imperfections were the narrative of our family. They were the history. Kara had erased them all and replaced them with a generic Pinterest board. I started, but my voice failed. I cleared my throat and tried again, the word scraping its way out. "You gutted it." "I renovated it," Kara corrected, her tone breezy. She walked over to the sink, which was now a massive farmhouse-style basin with a faucet that looked like it belonged in a commercial kitchen. She waved her hand near the neck of the faucet, and water instantly jetted out. "Look at this. Touchless technology. Totally hygienic. And look at the appliances. Hazel. Seriously, look at them." She pointed to a stainless steel refrigerator that was wider than my car. It had a screen embedded in the door that was displaying the weather forecast for Townsend. "It orders milk for you when you run low," she said, tapping the screen. "And this," she moved to a chrome monstrosity sitting on the counter. "This is a dual-boiler espresso machine with a built-in grinder. It cost $1,800. But honestly, can you put a price on a perfect morning latte? It pays for itself in 6 months if you stop going to Starbucks." I stared at the machine. $1,800. For coffee. I drank instant coffee when I was camping. I did not even know how to operate a machine that complex. "Kara," I said, the shock beginning to curdle into a cold, hard knot of dread. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because you deserve it," she insisted, leaning back against the counter and crossing her ankles. "You work so hard. Hazel, you are always traveling, always stressed. I wanted you to come home to a place that felt luxurious, a place that reflected your status. You are a high-powered executive. You should not be cooking in a kitchen that looks like a set from Little House on the Prairie." She paused, waiting for my gratitude. When I just stared at her with a face drained of blood, she faltered slightly, but her smile stayed plastered on. "Plus," she added, her voice taking on a practical, business-like cadence that sounded rehearsed, "I did the math. This renovation adds massive equity to the property. If you ever decide to sell, this kitchen alone bumps the asking price by at least 15%. I basically made you money." I looked around the room again. The sheer scale of the changes was overwhelming. This was not a weekend DIY project. This involved contractors, plumbers, electricians. It involved demolition crews. "How much?" I asked. The question was a whisper, but it cut through the hum of the smart fridge. Kara waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about the details right now. The important thing is the result." "Kara," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice I used when a vendor was trying to hide a supply chain failure. "How much did this cost?" She bit her lip, looking at the ceiling as if calculating a tip. "Well, with labor and materials, and getting the rush delivery on the quartz because the supply chain is a nightmare, you would know about that it came out to be reasonable." "Give me a number." She exhaled sharply, a puff of annoyance. $58,000, give or take." The room seemed to tilt. $58,000. That was not a renovation budget. That was a salary. That was more than the down payment I had put on my apartment in the city. $58,000 spent on a house I explicitly did not want to change. 58,000, I repeated, the syllables tasting like ash. You spent $58,000 on a kitchen I did not ask for. It is an investment, Kara cried, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. She pushed off the counter and took a step toward me, her hands raised in defense. And I got great deals on the labor because I managed the project myself. I was the general contractor. Basically, I saved you at least $10,000 in management fees. Saved me? I laughed, a harsh, dry sound that had no humor in it. Kara, you do not have $58,000. The last time we spoke, you were asking to borrow $500 to pay a speeding ticket. You do not have a job. You do not have savings. So unless you won the lottery and forgot to tell me, there is only one question that matters right now. I took a step toward her, invading her personal space. The smell of her expensive perfume was suffocating. Where did the money come from? Kara flinched, retreating until her lower back hit the quartz edge of the island. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit or an excuse. I handled it. I have resources you don't know about. I have been networking. Do not lie to me, I said. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of panic and rage. You cannot network $58,000 into existence in 3 months. Did you take out a loan? Did you put a lien on the house, Kara? Tell me right now. She looked down at her feet, her defiance crumbling into a petulant pout. I didn't want to bother you while you were in Germany. You said you were busy. You said not to contact you unless it was an emergency. So you stole $58,000. I didn't steal it, she snapped, her head snapping up, her eyes flashing with indignation. I used the family funds. I used the cards. The world stopped. The cards, I asked, my voice barely audible. What cards? Yours, she whispered. Then, seeing the look on my face, she rushed to explain, the words tumbling out over each other. The ones in the desk drawer in the study, the American Express, the Visa signature, the ones with the high limits. I knew you had them for business expenses and emergencies. This was a capital improvement. Hazel, it is technically a business expense if you think about the asset value. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. I had a file cabinet in the study upstairs. Locked. Inside, I kept my backup credit cards, the ones with zero balances that I kept for catastrophic emergencies, medical evacuations. Legal bail. Sudden unemployment. I had impeccable credit. My limits were high because I had spent 15 years building a reputation of absolute financial reliability. You broke into my desk, I said. It was not a question. I didn't break in, she argued. The key was in the pencil cup. Anyone could have found it. I just borrowed them. I figured since you were making so much money on this overseas contract, you would want to write off the taxes anyway. I was doing you a favor. Hazel, I was managing your portfolio. You maxed out my credit cards, I said, the reality crashing down on me. You spent $58,000 of my credit on a touchless faucet and a fridge that tells the weather. I am going to pay it back, she yelled, her voice echoing in the sterile room. Once my lifestyle brand launches next month, I am projected to make 6 figures in the first quarter. I have a business plan. I was going to pay off the balance before you even got the statement. You weren't even supposed to know. I turned away from her, unable to look at her face anymore. I needed data. I needed to see the carnage. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my purse on the slate floor. I scrambled to find my phone, my fingers fumbling with the passcode. I opened my banking app. Face ID did not work because my hands were trembling too much. So I had to type the code. The screen loaded. The balance on my primary checking account was normal. I navigated to the credit card tab. Red. Everything was red. The platinum card. Balance $24,342. Limit reached. The signature reserve balance. $31,890. Over limit pending authorization. The backup MasterCard I hadn't used in 4 years. Balance $4,000. I scrolled through the transaction history. It was an autopsy of my financial murder. Home Depot, $4,200. Best Buy, $2,100. Knoxville, stone tile, $8,500. Ferguson bath. Kitchen lighting, $6,300. Wayfair, $1,200. But it wasn't just the kitchen. My thumb kept scrolling, and the nausea rose in my throat. Sephora, $400. Lululemon, $350. Liquor Barn, $200. Uber Eats, $65. Uber Eats, $80. Uber Eats, $110. She hadn't just renovated the kitchen. She had been living off me. She had been eating my money, wearing my money, drinking my money. You didn't just buy a kitchen, I said, holding the phone up, the screen glowing like an accusation. You bought a life. You have been funding your entire existence with my identity. Kara crossed her arms, her chin jutting out. The mask of the helpful sister had fully slipped, revealing the narcissist beneath. I needed to eat, Hazel. I needed clothes. I am trying to build a brand here. I have to look the part. You can't understand because you are a corporate drone. But in my world, image is currency. You are a thief, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. This is fraud. This is grand larceny. You stole my identity, and you stole my money. Oh, stop using legal words, she scoffed. We are sisters. It is a domestic dispute at worst. Mom would never let you press charges, so don't even try to bluff me. I am not bluffing, I said, my voice steadying into a cold calm. I want you out. Now, get your things, get in your car, and get off my property. I am changing the locks tonight. Kara laughed. It was a chilling sound, devoid of warmth. She walked over to the quartz island and leaned her palms on it, staring me down. I don't think so, she said. Excuse me. I have been here for 3 months. Hazel, she said, her voice dripping with a smug, toxic sweetness. I get mail here. I have utility bills in my name. I switched the internet over when yours got spotty. I have a key, in the state of Tennessee. That makes me a tenant. I have established residency. My mouth fell open slightly. She had researched this. She hadn't researched a business plan, but she had researched how to steal my house. You are kidding me, I said. Look it up, she challenged. You can't just kick me out. You have to serve me with an eviction notice. You have to give me 30 days. And if you try to change the locks or throw my stuff out, that is an illegal eviction. I could sue you for damages, and I would win. She picked up the ceramic mug, my mug, and took a slow, deliberate sip, her eyes never leaving mine. So, she said, setting the mug down on the $1,800 espresso machine, since I am staying, and you are staying, maybe we should just order pizza. I think there is still some room on the MasterCard. I looked at her, standing there in the wreckage of my sanctuary, surrounded by the expensive, sterile evidence of her betrayal. I looked at the phone in my hand, displaying the mathematical proof of my ruin. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a sister who had lost her way. This was a parasite that had burrowed into the bedrock of my life, and she had just told me that extracting her would tear the house down. I realized then that the kitchen was just the opening move. She hadn't just remodeled a room. She was remodeling the power dynamic of our entire relationship. She thought she had checkmated me with a quartz countertop and a tenant law loophole. I gripped my phone until the edges dug into my palm. She was right about one thing. I was a corporate drone. I spent my life negotiating with hostile entities, navigating broken systems, and dismantling complex problems. She thought she was digging in. She had no idea she had just declared war on the wrong project manager. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving Kara leaning against her stolen quartz countertop. I could feel her eyes boring into my back, likely filled with that mix of pity and disdain she reserved for anyone who did not understand her vision. She probably thought I would storm out the front door, get in my car, and drive away to cool off, just like I did when we were teenagers. She expected me to retreat. She was wrong. I was not retreating. I was conducting an audit. I moved to the hallway bathroom first. This was the guest bath. The one I kept pristine with white towels and a single bar of lavender soap. I pushed the door open and felt my stomach turn over. It looked like a beauty counter had exploded. Every inch of the vanity was covered in bottles, jars, and tubes. There were serums, toners, exfoliants, and masks. Brands that I knew cost upwards of $300 an ounce. The sink was stained with residue from a charcoal mask. My white towels were on the floor, damp and smeared with self-tanner. I picked up a jar of moisturizer. It was heavy, glass, and expensive. I turned it over. The price tag was still on the bottom. $250. I dropped it into the trash can. I moved to the master bedroom, my sanctuary. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and stopped. The air smelled stale, heavy with the scent of unwashed laundry and that cloying vanilla perfume. My bed, the antique iron frame I had hunted for at estate sales for 2 years, was unmade. A tangle of sheets that were not mine. They were silk, slippery and gray, piling on the floor. I went to the closet. I pulled the doors open. My clothes were gone, my tailored blazers, my hiking gear, my silk blouses all gone. In their place hung rows of bohemian dresses, fringed jackets, and sequined tops that looked cheap despite their likely high price tags. I looked down. In the corner of the closet, shoved unceremoniously into heavy-duty trash bags, I saw fabrics I recognized, my wardrobe. She had packed my life into garbage bags to make room for her costumes. I did not scream. The anger was past the point of screaming. It had solidified into something cold and sharp, like a blade of ice in my gut. I turned and marched down the hall to the third bedroom, the one I used as my office. This was where I made my living. This was where I managed multi-million-dollar logistics contracts. I had a specific setup: dual monitors, ergonomic chair, soundproofing. I opened the door and blinked, trying to process the visual assault. My monitors were unplugged and sitting on the floor. My desk was cleared of my equipment and was now covered in what looked like a set for a teenage influencer. There was a ring light the size of a tractor tire clamped to the edge of the desk. There were backdrops: fake brick, fake marble, fake greenery rolled up in the corner. There was a tripod holding a camera that I knew cost at least $4,000. But it was the drawers that drew me in. I walked over to the desk. Stepping over a tangle of extension cords, I yanked the top drawer open. It was a graveyard of financial irresponsibility. There were invoices shoved in there, crumpled and disregarded. There were packing slips. There were bank envelopes, ripped open and stuffed back in. I grabbed a handful of papers and started reading. An invoice for a custom velvet sofa, $4,500. A receipt for a mobile spa service that came to the cabin, $600 a week for 6 weeks. A packing slip for high-end audio equipment, $3,200. A bill for a shipment of essential oils and branding materials for something called Quite Luxury, $8,000. I kept digging. I found a folder marked urgent but clearly ignored. Inside were letters from credit card companies, my credit card companies. They were notifications of credit limit increases. She had requested them. She had approved them. I did the mental math, my brain clicking into professional gear. $58,000 for the kitchen, $4,000 for the camera, $8,000 for the branding, the clothes, the skincare. The furniture I hadn't even seen yet in the guest rooms. The deliveries I saw on the bank statement earlier. This was not $58,000. I looked at a crumpled invoice for a home theater system installation that I hadn't even noticed in the living room yet because I had been so focused on the kitchen. $12,000. The total was racing past $100,000. $100,000. She had spent a fortune. She had spent a down payment on a house. She had spent my retirement savings, my emergency fund, my future. Hey, I spun around. Kara was standing in the doorway of the office, holding her phone up as if she were recording me. Her face was flushed with indignation. "You can't just go through my private things," she snapped. "That is my workspace. I am in the middle of a concept shoot for the new line." I looked at her, holding the fistful of invoices. "Your private things, Kara. These are my bills. This is my desk. This is my house. I slammed the papers down on the desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. $100,000, I said, my voice low and trembling with the effort to keep it steady. I am doing a rough estimate here, but between the kitchen, the electronics, the clothes, and the spa treatments, you have burned through over $100,000 of my credit. Kara rolled her eyes, lowering the phone. You are exaggerating, and like I said, I am going to pay it back. I just needed seed capital. You know banks won't lend to creatives. They don't understand the vision. I just borrowed it. It is a bridge loan. A bridge loan, I repeated, stepping around the desk to close the distance between us. A bridge loan is a contract. A bridge loan has terms. This is theft. You forged my signature. You impersonated me to the bank. I did not impersonate you, she argued, stepping back into the hallway. I just facilitated the transactions. And I will pay you back with interest when the project takes off. I have 5,000 followers already. The engagement rate is insane. Once I launch the pre-sale next week, the money is going to pour in. She actually believed it. I could see it in her eyes. She believed that her imaginary business was going to magically generate 6 figures of profit in a week. She was delusional, and that delusion had just cost me everything I had worked for in the last decade. I took a deep breath. I needed to be clear. I needed to be absolute. I am not interested in your business plan, I said. I am not interested in your followers. Here is what is going to happen. I looked at the diver's watch on my wrist. It was 4 p.m. You have 2 hours, I said. You are going to pack your personal belongings, the ones you actually paid for. If there are any, you are going to put my things back where you found them. You are going to leave the key on the counter. And you are going to get in your car and drive away. Kara stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Then, she let out a short, incredulous laugh. 2 hours, she scoffed. Hazel, be serious. I live here. I can't move out in 2 hours. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, I said. Go to a hotel. Go to Mom's. Go to hell. Just get out of my house. Her face crumbled. The mask of the successful entrepreneur vanished, replaced by the face of the victim she had perfected since childhood. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. You are so selfish, she choked out. You have always been selfish. You have this big house, this huge salary, this perfect life. You travel the world. You have everything. And I just wanted one thing. I just wanted a place to breathe. I wanted a chance to finally make something of myself without worrying about rent for 5 minutes. You stole $100,000, I yelled, my control finally slipping. That is not breathing room, Kara. That is a felony. It is always about money with you, she screamed back. You think you are so superior because you sold your soul to a corporation. You think you are better than me because you follow the rules. Well, guess what? Not everyone is a robot like you. Some of us have feelings. Some of us need support from our family, not an eviction notice. Support is asking for help, I said, my voice dropping back to that deadly calm. Support is not breaking into my desk and stealing my identity. Speaking of which, I held up the fistful of credit card statements. How did you get the security codes? I asked. How did you activate the new cards? They ask for social security numbers. They ask for mothers' maiden names. Kara sniffed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. It was in the file, she mumbled. What file? The red folder in the bottom drawer, she said, her voice defiant again. You keep copies of everything. Birth certificates, social security cards, passports. I found it when I was organizing. I memorized the numbers. I wrote them down, just in case of an emergency. I figured if something happened to you while you were gone, someone needed to have access to handle your affairs. My blood ran cold. She hadn't just found a credit card left on a counter. She had systematically mined my personal data. She had my social security number. She had my passport details. She had everything she needed to become me. "You are not a tenant," I said, the realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. "You are not a guest. You are a criminal. You are an intruder who has committed identity theft and credit card fraud. 2 hours. Kara, if you are not gone by 6 o'clock, I am calling the police." The air in the hallway shifted. The tears on Kara's face stopped. Her expression hardened into something ugly, something sharp and vicious. "You won't call the police," she said softly. "Try me," I said. "If you call the police on your own sister," she hissed, taking a step toward me, "Mom will never forgive you. The aunts will never forgive you. You will be the pariah. You will be the cold-hearted monster who put her baby sister in jail over some money. Do you really want to be alone? Hazel. Because if you make that call, the family will never look at you again." I stared at her. She was weaponizing our mother. She was weaponizing the dysfunction that had plagued our family for generations. The idea that keeping secrets was more important than doing what was right. She knew exactly where to hit me. She knew my fear of isolation. She knew how much I craved the family connection I rarely got. But she had miscalculated. She thought I was the same Hazel who used to pay her parking tickets to keep Mom from crying. She didn't know the Hazel who had negotiated hostages out of a warehouse in cargo shipping disputes. She didn't know the Hazel who had fired entire management teams for incompetence. "I would rather be alone," I said, my voice trembling not with fear, but with the adrenaline of the decision. "Then be a victim." I pushed past her. I couldn't stay in the house. The air felt toxic. The sight of her standing there, smug in her threat, made me nauseous. I needed to get out. I needed signal. I needed to document this before she destroyed anything else. "Where are you going?" she called after me, her voice rising in panic. "Hazel, you can't just leave." I didn't answer. I marched down the hallway, past the mutilated kitchen, past the mocking welcome sign. I grabbed my keys from the table. I walked out the front door and slammed it shut, the sound echoing through the trees. I got into my sedan. My hands were shaking so hard, I had trouble fitting the key into the ignition. I started the car and reversed out, spinning gravel as I turned around. I saw the curtain in the living room twitch. She was watching. I headed down the mountain road, easing through every bend with more caution than my rage deserved. The sun dropped beneath the tree line, stretching long shadows over the asphalt. My pulse hammered up in my throat. I was scared. I was livid. I was shattered. But by the time I reached the base of the hill and merged onto the main road toward Townsend, the tremor in my hands faded, swapped for something colder, steadier, unmovable. She believed family pressure would cave me in. She believed the threat of loneliness would make me hand over my bank accounts. She was wrong. I wasn't going to negotiate with someone who used fear like a weapon, even if we shared the same blood. I was going into town. I was going to get a lawyer, and I was going to reclaim my life, one billable hour at a time. I drove on to Knoxville, the skyline rising in the windshield like a jagged gray promise that order still existed somewhere inside the chaos. I didn't check into a hotel. I didn't duck into a bar to dull the impact. I went to the one place where emotions were irrelevant and facts were ammunition. Dana Holloway's office was tucked away in a brick building downtown, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a notary public. It was small, unpretentious, and smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish and old paper. Dana herself was a woman made of sharp angles and sharper intellect. She did not offer me tea. She did not offer me a tissue. She offered me a legal pad and a pen. And then she sat back in her creaking leather chair and listened. I talked for 40 minutes. I laid it out with the precision of a project manager, the unauthorized entry, the structural changes, the timeline of my absence, the credit card statements, the forged signatures, and the admission of guilt Kara had made in the kitchen. When I finished, the room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Dana tapped her pen against the desk, a rhythmic, hollow sound. "You have a problem, Hazel," she said, her voice gravelly and direct. "But it is not the problem you think you have. Your problem is not the money. We can trace the money. Your problem is that the perpetrator is your sister. I know, I said, my voice steady. She thinks that protects her. It usually does, Dana replied. In 90% of these cases, the victim backs down, the parents get involved, the guilt trips start. They settle for a repayment plan that never gets paid, and they eat the debt to keep the peace at Thanksgiving. If you go down this road, you are not just suing her, you are effectively nuking your family dynamic. Are you ready for that? I thought about the smirk on Kara's face. I thought about the way she leaned against the quartz countertop she bought with my future. She committed a felony, I said. She stole my identity. She did, Dana nodded, flipping open a fresh page on her notepad. Identity theft, credit card fraud, forgery, grand larceny given the amount. If we prove she signed your name on contractor agreements, that is fraud in the inducement. This is not a civil dispute over a borrowed sweater. This is prison time, real prison time. Do it, I said. I want to file everything, criminal charges and a civil suit for damages. I want a paper trail so thick she can never claim this was a misunderstanding. Dana cracked a rare, thin smile. All right then, let us get to work. I need a timeline. I need every text message, every email, every voicemail. But first, you have homework. She slid a checklist across the desk. You need to stop the bleeding, she instructed. Go to the bank, not online, go in person, lock everything down. Then go to the police station. You need a formal report number to get the credit bureaus to take you seriously. And then, you need to go back to that cabin and document the crime scene. The crime scene, I repeated. It felt surreal to apply that term to my own home. It is a crime scene, Dana said firmly. Take photos of everything, the new appliances, the clothes, the damage to your original property. Find the contracts she signed, and Hazel, do not engage with her. If she speaks to you, record it if you can. But do not argue. You are not her sister anymore. You are a landlord evicting a hostile squatter. I left her office with a retainer agreement signed and a battle plan in hand. My next stop was the regional branch of my bank. Sitting in the glass-walled cubicle with a personal banker named Timothy was a humiliating experience. I had to explain, in excruciating detail, that I had not authorized $58,000 in home renovations. And you are sure you did not give her verbal permission? Timothy asked. His brow furrowed as he typed. Sometimes family members share cards for groceries and things get out of hand. Timothy, I said, leaning forward. She bought a kitchen. She bought a home theater. She did not buy groceries. I was in Germany. My passport stamps prove I was nowhere near the point of sale. Right, he said, flushing slightly. I will mark these as disputed. We are going to close these accounts immediately and issue new numbers. I am also placing a fraud alert on your profile. Any transaction over $50 will require phone verification. Freeze it all, I said. I want to freeze my credit with all 3 bureaus. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. I do not want anyone to be able to open a library card in my name without a DNA sample. I can help you with the freeze, he said. But you should know, this will make it hard for you to use credit for a while. Good, I said. If it is hard for me, it will be impossible for her. I watched him cut my platinum card with a pair of scissors. The sound of the plastic snapping was satisfying, a small act of violence against the mess Kara had created. The police station was next. The waiting room smelled of stale coffee and damp linoleum. I waited for 45 minutes before a uniformed officer led me back to a desk cluttered with paperwork. Detective Grant Maddox was a man who looked like he had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. He listened to my story with a neutral expression, taking notes in a small spiral notebook. It is a lot of money, Maddox said, looking at the spreadsheet of transactions I had printed at the bank. Usually when we get family theft, it is someone stealing grandma's pills or swiping a debit card for a few $100 at a casino. 6 figures, that is ambitious. She thinks she is entitled to it, I said. She thinks because we are family, it is community property. Doesn't work that way, Maddox said, tapping his pen. But here's the catch. Ms. Cooper, to make a fraud charge stick, especially with a sibling, we need to prove intent. We need to prove she didn't just think she had permission. Did she sign your name? She must have, I said. The contractors wouldn't have done the work without a signature from the homeowner. Get me those contracts, Maddox said. If she signed Hazel Cooper on a work order, that is forgery. That is concrete. Also, proof of unauthorized entry would be good. Did she break a window, pick a lock? She used a spare key I left for my mother, I admitted. Maddox grimaced. That makes it trickier. She had access. A defense lawyer will argue you gave implied consent by leaving the key available. We need something that shows she knew she was hiding this from you. Did she intercept mail? Did she change passwords? I sat there, feeling the exhaustion wash over me. I needed a smoking gun. And then, it hit me. Cameras, I whispered. Maddox looked up. Excuse me. I have cameras, I said, my heart starting to race. I installed a cloud-based security system 2 years ago. I put one on the front porch, one on the back deck, and one in the hallway facing the office. I had completely forgotten about them. I had been so busy in Europe, so overwhelmed with work, that I had stopped checking the notifications months ago. Eventually, the app had just become background noise on my phone. Are they active? Maddox asked, leaning forward. They are on auto-renew, I said. The footage saves to the cloud for 180 days. Check them, Maddox ordered. If you have video of her accessing your private files or talking about hiding this from you, that is your golden ticket. I walked out of the station with a case number written on the back of a business card. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I got back into my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I felt different. 2 hours ago, I was a victim. Now, I was an investigator. I started the engine and turned the car back toward the mountain. I had to go back. Dana had been clear. I needed to document the scene. I needed to take inventory. I needed to face her one more time. Not to argue, but to witness. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. It was a text message from my mother. Kara called me in tears. She says you are kicking her out on the street. She says she has nowhere to go. Hazel, how can you be so cruel? She is your sister. She made a mistake. Please, just calm down and let us talk about this as a family. The manipulation was right on schedule. Kara had spun the narrative immediately. To Mom, I wasn't the victim of a $100,000 theft. I was the mean big sister bullying the fragile baby of the family. I did not reply. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The anger that had been burning hot was now cooling into a hard, dense resolve. They wanted to talk about this as a family fine. We would talk about it, but we would talk about it with evidence. I pulled over into a scenic overlook about halfway up the mountain road. It was getting dark, the twilight turning the trees into silhouettes. I needed to know what was waiting for me before I walked back into that house. I picked up my phone and opened the security app. It took a moment to load. The little circles spinning on the screen. Then, the dashboard appeared. Front door, back deck, hallway. I clicked on hallway. I scrolled back through the timeline. There were hundreds of clips. Kara walking by in a bathrobe. Kara carrying boxes. Kara with friends I didn't know. I filtered by date. I went back 3 months, to the week I suspected she moved in. I found a clip from a Tuesday afternoon, timestamp 2:30 in the afternoon. I pressed play. The video showed the hallway outside my office. The door to the office was closed. Kara appeared in the frame. She was wearing a hoodie and looking over her shoulder. Even though she was alone in the house, she looked nervous. She opened the office door and disappeared inside. The camera angle caught the edge of the desk. I watched, holding my breath. A moment later, she came back out, holding the red accordion folder from my bottom drawer, the one marked Personal Documents. She sat down on the floor in the hallway, right in front of the camera, clearly not realizing it was recording. She opened the folder. She pulled out my passport. She pulled out my social security card. She pulled out the emergency credit card I kept in a sealed envelope. Then, she took her phone out of her pocket. I watched in high-definition horror as my sister laid my documents out on the floorboards. She took a photo of the passport. She flipped it over. She took a photo of the Social Security card. She opened the envelope, took out the credit card, and photographed the front. Then she flipped it and photographed the security code on the back. She wasn't just borrowing a card she found. She was building a digital dossier of my identity. She typed something into her phone, referencing the documents. She was likely setting up an online profile, answering security questions, mother's maiden name, city of birth, first pet. She knew all of it. After 10 minutes of methodical documentation, she put everything back in the folder, stood up, and went back into the office. She came out empty-handed a second later, dusting off her hands as if she had just finished a chore. I paused the video. My hand was shaking. This was not impulsive. This was not a desperate woman needing groceries. This was cold. This was calculated. This was a predator dissecting her prey. I saved the clip. I emailed it to Dana. I emailed it to my own secure work account. Then I put the car in drive. The text from my mother flashed on the screen again. She made a mistake. No, Mom. A mistake is spilling wine on a rug. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. What I had just watched was not a mistake. It was an execution, and now I had the weapon I needed to fight back. I drove the rest of the way up the mountain in silence. I was no longer afraid of the confrontation. I was no longer worried about the awkwardness. I was returning to my house not as a sister, but as the owner, and the tenant was about to learn that the lease had been terminated for cause. The headlights of my sedan cut through the darkness as I climbed the final stretch of the gravel driveway. My chest was tight, a physical band of pressure that had not released since I left the police station. I expected to see the glossy black bumper of Kara's SUV blocking my path, a visual declaration that she was digging in for a siege. I was prepared for a screaming match. I was prepared for her to barricade the door, but the driveway was empty. The silence of the mountain was absolute. The wind rustled the high branches of the pines, but the invasive mechanical hum of her presence was gone. The house stood dark against the night sky, a silhouette that felt less like a sanctuary and more like a crime scene that had been cleared. I parked and killed the engine. I did not feel relief. Relief implies safety, and I knew with a bone-deep certainty that I was not safe. I walked to the front door, my phone acting as a flashlight. The key turned in the lock with a heavy click. I pushed the door open and flipped the switch. The living room was a wreck, but not in the way a storm leaves wreckage. This was the specific, calculated chaos of a looting. The massive television she had bought with my credit card was gone. The mounting bracket still hung on the wall, 4 jagged holes exposing the drywall dust. I walked into the kitchen. The $1,800 espresso machine was gone. The countertop was bare, save for a sticky ring of syrup where it had stood. She had taken the high-value items, the things she could easily resell or use to furnish her next host organism. But as I moved deeper into the house, the theft turned personal. I went to the linen closet. It was empty. She had taken the Dyson vacuum. She had taken the high-thread count sheets. She had even taken the bulk supply of paper towels. It was petty. It was vindictive. It was her way of saying that if she could not have the house, she would strip the meat from the bones. I went into the guest room she had occupied. The closet doors were flung open. The clothes she had bought with my money were gone. Naturally, but on the floor, in a tangled heap, were my own clothes, the hiking gear, and winter coats she had shoved into bags. She had dumped them out before she left, likely to use the bags for her loot. My North Face jacket was trampled, a boot print clearly visible on the sleeve. I kept walking, my dread mounting. I went to the small cedar chest at the foot of my bed in the master bedroom. This was where I kept the things that had no monetary value but meant everything to me. I lifted the lid. My grandmother's quilt, the one hand-stitched from scraps of our childhood dresses, was gone. I felt the air leave my lungs. That quilt was irreplaceable. It smelled like lavender and dust and memory. Kara knew that. She knew I would run into a burning building to save that quilt. And she had taken it. Not because she wanted it, she had called it a rag just hours ago, but because she knew it would hurt me. I ran to the dresser. The small silver jewelry box was gone. Inside was my grandmother's locket and the pearl earrings I wore to my college graduation. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, the room spinning. This was not just financial fraud. This was an exorcism. She was erasing me from my own history. Then I remembered the red folder. I scrambled up and ran to the office. The desk drawers were pulled out and left hanging like tongues. Papers littered the floor. I fell to my knees and began shifting through the mess. I found the red accordion folder under a pile of rejected invoices. I ripped it open. Empty. My stomach dropped. The video I had watched in the car showed her photographing the documents. But the reality of the empty folder was a different kind of horror. She had taken the physical copies, my birth certificate, my social security card, the last 3 years of my tax returns, a photocopy of my passport. With those documents, she did not just need to shop online. She could walk into a bank branch and claim to be me. She could apply for a driver's license. She could verify her identity for government loans. She had the keys to the kingdom. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency police line again to update my report, my voice shaking as I listed the stolen documents. Then I called the credit bureaus back, escalating the freeze to the highest level of security. Requiring a verbal password for any access, I needed to wash my face. I felt dirty, covered in the invisible grime of violation. I walked into the bathroom and flipped on the light. I stopped. Written on the large mirror in bright red lipstick was a message. The letters were jagged, written in haste and fury. You always look down on me. I stared at the red grease on the glass. The words hung there, accusing and delusional. I had never looked down on her. I had bailed her out. I had paid her rent. I had listened to her endless pitches for businesses that made no sense. I had been the safety net she swung into every time she let go of the trapeze. But in her mind, my stability was an insult. My success was a mirror reflecting her own failures. And she hated me for it. My phone began to buzz in my pocket. It was a continuous vibration, an angry insect demanding attention. I pulled it out. Mom calling. I declined it. 2 seconds later, Mom calling. I declined it again. Then a text message popped up. Aunt Linda Hazel, your mother is hysterical. Kara is driving to Atlanta in the middle of the night because you threw her out. She says she has no money for gas. How can you be so cold? She is your sister. Another text. This time from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Cousin Sarah. I heard what happened. Money comes and goes. Hazel. But family is forever. Don't let greed ruin your relationship. I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound in the empty bathroom. Greed. They thought I was the greedy one. They thought the person who had just had 6 figures stolen from them was the villain because I refused to be a host for the parasite any longer. None of them asked if I was okay. None of them asked about the theft. They only saw the crying younger sister and the mean, rich older sister. It was a script they had been reading from for 30 years. I turned the phone to silent, but the screen kept lighting up. It was a bombardment. A collective gaslighting campaign designed to make me doubt my own reality. I sank onto the floor of the bathroom, pulling my knees to my chest. The isolation was suffocating. I was alone in a house that felt hostile, surrounded by a family that had turned against me. I felt the resolve I had built up in the car starting to crack. Maybe I was too hard. Maybe I should have just let her stay one more night. Then, the phone lit up with a different name. Riley Carter. Riley was my roommate from college. She was a forensic accountant in Chicago now, a woman who saw the world in black and white, debits and credits. She was the only person who knew the full extent of Kara's history because she had watched me pay for it for a decade. I picked up. I am looking at flights, Riley said. No hello, no preamble. Riley, I choked out, the tears finally spilling over. She took everything. She took Grandma's quilt. I know, Riley said, her voice hard and crisp. I saw your text. I am on the 6 a.m. flight to Knoxville. I will rent a car. I will be there by noon. You don't have to, I said weakly. You have work. I have vacation days, she countered. And you are currently a flight risk for caving in. I know you. Hazel. You are sitting there looking at that lipstick on the mirror and wondering if you are a bad person. You are not. You are a victim of a narcissist who is currently conducting a smear campaign. Do not answer the phone. Do not reply to texts. Drink a glass of water and lock the door. I am coming. She hung up. I lowered the phone, taking a shaky breath. Riley was right. I was teetering on the edge of capitulation because that was how I was programmed. But having witnessed someone outside the toxic family bubble gave me a tether. I stood up and wiped the lipstick off the mirror with a wad of toilet paper. It smeared, turning the glass pink. But the words disappeared. I walked out to the kitchen, that alien, white, sterile kitchen. The refrigerator hummed its expensive tune. I sat on one of the bar stools Kara had bought. It was uncomfortable, designed for looks rather than sitting. I looked around. This space was supposed to be the heart of the home. Now, it was a monument to her envy. I tried to summon the memory of the old kitchen, the smell of pine, the warmth of the wood, but it felt distant, like a memory from a movie I had seen once. She had not just stolen my money. She had stolen the sensory experience of my sanctuary. I opened my laptop. I needed to distract myself. I needed to check my email, to see if there was any work from the firm I needed to address, anything to pull me back to the world where I was competent and respected. I scrolled past the spam, past the notifications from the credit bureaus confirming the freeze. Then I saw it. An email from LendKey Financial Services. Subject action required. Additional verification for your home equity line of credit application. I frowned. I had not applied for a home equity line of credit. I had zero debt on the cabin. I owned it outright. I clicked the email. Dear Hazel Cooper, thank you for your application for a secured line of credit in the amount of $150,000 against the property at 442 Pine Ridge Road. We have received your electronic signature, but due to the recent address change on your file, we require a secondary form of identification to finalize the disbursement. The room went cold. The timestamp on the application was from 3 days ago. She hadn't just used the credit cards. She hadn't just cleared out the bank accounts. She was trying to mortgage the house. I grabbed my phone and called Dana. It was 9 o'clock at night. I did not care. Holloway, she answered on the second ring, her voice alert. Dana, I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. She tried to take a loan against the house. What? Dana asked sharply. I just got an email, I said, reading the subject line to her. $150,000. She applied for a HELOC. She must have used the deed. She knows where I keep the deed. There was a silence on the line, heavy and pregnant. Did the money go through? Dana asked. No, I said. They flagged it for verification because she changed the address. She must have tried to route the mail to a P.O. box, so I wouldn't see it. Hazel, Dana said. And her tone was different now. It was no longer the tone of a lawyer advising a client on a theft. It was the tone of a general watching the enemy flank the line. You need to understand what this means. She was not just looking for spending money. $150,000 against the equity, that is an exit strategy. What do you mean? I mean she was going to drain the equity and disappear, Dana said. If that loan had funded, you would be on the hook for the mortgage. If you couldn't pay it, and with your accounts drained, the bank would foreclose. She was willing to let you lose the house. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the walls that had sheltered 3 generations of my family. Kara had grown up here too. She had played on the rug she threw away. She had eaten at the table she destroyed, and she was willing to sell it all to a bank for a year of luxury living. She wanted to take the house, I whispered. She wanted the money, Dana corrected. The house was just collateral damage. Listen to me. We need to file for an emergency protective order first thing in the morning, and we need to file a lis pendens on the property immediately to prevent any other lenders from touching it. If she has your passport and social, she might try a different lender. Do it, I said. Do whatever you have to do. Lock the doors. Hazel, Dana said, and check the windows. Desperation makes people dangerous. She knows the walls are closing in. I hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the email that proved my sister was not just a thief, but an executioner of my life. I realized then that if I had stayed in Europe for another week, or if the bank's fraud algorithm had been slightly less sensitive, I would have come home to a foreclosure notice. The sadness I had felt earlier evaporated. The guilt about the family pressure dissolved. I walked to the front door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I slid the heavy security chain into place. I went to the back door and wedged a chair under the handle. I was under siege. But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who the enemy was, and I was not going to let her take one more shingle of this roof. The laptop screen was the only source of light in the kitchen, casting a ghostly blue pallor over my hands as I navigated the labyrinth of the credit bureau's interface. I had paid the extra fee for the forensic level report, the kind that did not just show you the current score, but gave you the autopsy of your financial history. I had expected to see the damage from the last 3 months. I had braced myself for the $58,000 for the kitchen and the various luxury goods she had piled onto my active cards. But as the PDF loaded, scrolling down page after endless page, the air in the room seemed to thin, making it hard to breathe. It was not just the last 3 months. There was a personal loan taken out 3 years ago for $5,000. Status closed, paid in full. There was a retail credit card for a high-end electronics store opened 4 years ago. Status charge-off, sold to collections. There were inquiry clusters hard pulls on my credit dating back to times when I was visiting home for Christmas, or times when Kara had come to stay with me in the city for a girls' weekend. I traced the timeline with a shaking finger. Every time she had been in my physical space, my digital identity had bled. The total was not $100,000. As I added up the closed accounts, the interest payments on hidden balances, and the current devastation, the number climbed higher. 120,000, 140,000. It settled grimly at just over $150,000. I sat back, the plastic of the bar stool biting into my spine. This was not a desperate reaction to a failed business in Atlanta. This was a parasitic relationship that had been running in the background of my life for half a decade. She had been skimming off the top of my success for years, taking just enough to go unnoticed, or opening accounts I would not see because she routed the mail to a post office box in a town 3 hours away. I picked up the phone and called Detective Maddox. It was early, barely 8 in the morning, but I knew he was on shift. "Cooper," he answered, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "It goes back years," I said, skipping the pleasantries. I pulled the full history. She opened a loan in my name 3 years ago. She defaulted on a card 4 years ago. I never knew because the collections agency was sending letters to an address I have never lived at. Maddox did not sound surprised. That lack of surprise hurt more than the theft. "Ms. Cooper, I see this all the time. People do not start with 6 figures. They do not wake up one morning and decide to remodel a kitchen with a stolen identity. They practice. They start with a tank of gas, then a grocery run, then a small loan to see if you notice. When you don't, they get bold. She has been grooming your finances for a long time." "Grooming," I repeated. It was a word usually reserved for predators of a different nature, but it fit. She had groomed me to be her unknowing benefactor. "Get me that report," Maddox said. "This upgrades the intent. It proves a pattern of criminal activity. Not just a one-time lapse in judgment, it helps us bury the 'I just borrowed it' defense." I hung up and immediately dialed Dana. She answered on the first ring, sharp and ready. "We have a pattern," I told her, relaying what Maddox had said. "Good," Dana said, the scratch of her pen audible over the line. "We are going to build a RICO case on a micro scale. We need to demonstrate that she ran a systematic enterprise of exploitation. But Hazel, I need you to nail down the current fraud. I need you to get the contractors on record. If she signed your name, That is the nail in the coffin. I spent the next 2 hours making calls that made my stomach churn. I called the number on the invoice for the kitchen renovation Tennessee Valley custom cabinetry. "This is Hazel Cooper," I said to the receptionist. "I am calling about the job at 442 Pine Ridge Road." "Oh, Ms. Cooper." "The kitchen turned out beautifully, didn't it?" The voice was cheerful, oblivious. "We were just talking about your project. It is going to be in our portfolio brochure." "I need to ask you something," I said, keeping my voice level. "Who signed the contract for the work?" "Why you did, honey," she said. "I have it right here, signed electronically on May 15th. And then the change order for the quartz was signed in person on June 2nd. "I was in Germany on June 2nd, I said. "Can you send me a copy of that document?" A pause. "Is there a problem?" "I just need to see the signature," I said. When the email arrived 2 minutes later, I opened the attachment. There, at the bottom of a work order for $12,000 of quartz, was a signature, Hazel Cooper. But it was not my signature. My signature was a sharp, angular scrawl, the result of signing thousands of manifestos and contracts. This signature was loopy. It had hearts over the eyes. It was the handwriting of a teenage girl trying to look elegant. It was Kara's handwriting. I called the project manager, a man named Mike, whose number was listed on the bottom of the invoice. "Mike," I said, after introducing myself, "when you met with the woman at the house, did she say why she was renovating?" "She sure did," Mike said, his tone shifting to confusion as he sensed my intensity. "She said she was the owner, said she had been traveling for work, which fits what you are saying about Germany, and that she wanted to upgrade the place." Then he hesitated. "What is it?" "Mike," I pushed. "Well," he said slowly, "it was a little odd. She kept asking about resale value. Usually, people renovate to enjoy the kitchen. She wanted to know specifically what finishes would generate the highest return for a quick sale. She used those words exactly, quick sale. She asked if we could finish in under 30 days, because she wanted to list it before the market cooled in the fall." My hand gripped the phone so hard I thought the screen might crack. "She said she wanted to sell it." "Yeah," Mike said. "She asked if I knew any realtors who handled pocket listings. You know, off-market deals. I thought maybe she was flipping it." I thanked him and hung up. The coldness in my chest was spreading. She hadn't just moved in. She hadn't just wanted a nice place to live while she launched her fake business. She was renovating the house with my money so she could sell it out from under me. I went to my laptop and started searching. I typed my address into Google, but nothing recent came up. Then I went to the Wayback Machine, the internet archive that saved cached versions of websites. I searched for rental listings in Townsend. It took me an hour, but I found it. A listing on a vacation rental site, posted 2 months ago and deleted last week. Cozy Mountain Escape, recently renovated, long-term inquiries welcome. The photos were of my house, but the contact info wasn't mine. It was a Google Voice number I didn't recognize, but the email address associated with the account was k.whitmore.management@gmail.com. She had been trying to monetize the cabin while I was gone, and if Mike was right, she was pivoting from renting it to selling it. A car door slammed outside. I jumped. My nerves frayed. I checked the window. A silver rental car was parked next to my sedan. A woman with a sharp bob haircut and a trench coat was marching up the steps, carrying a duffel bag like a weapon. Riley. I unlocked the door, and before I could even say hello, she pulled me into a hug that squeezed the breath out of me. She smelled like airport coffee and aggressive competence. "Okay," Riley said, pulling back and holding me at arm's length. Her eyes scanned my face, assessing the damage. "You look like hell, but we are going to fix this. I brought bagels, and I brought a military-grade hard drive. Where do we start?" "She tried to sell it," I whispered. "The contractor said she was asking about a quick sale." Riley's face hardened. She dropped her bag on the floor. "Then we are not just auditing, we are fortifying. Give me your phone." She took my phone and immediately opened the settings. "We are changing every password you have, email, bank, cloud, social media, And we are setting up two-factor authentication to my phone number, not yours, just in case she cloned your SIM card. It happens. She has my passport, I said. She has my social. We will flag those, Riley said. But first, physical security. Riley spent the next 3 hours turning my cabin into a fortress. We drove into town and bought new deadbolts. We installed them ourselves, Riley wielding the drill with terrifying precision. We reset the Wi-Fi router, kicking off every device that wasn't currently in our hands. We downloaded every second of footage from the cloud cameras to 3 separate locations: my laptop, her hard drive, and a secure server she used for work. We are drawing a line, Riley said, wiping sweat from her forehead as she tightened the final screw on the back door lock. She does not get back in, not to get a toothbrush, not to get a charger. If she shows up, she talks to the police. We were sitting in the living room, surrounded by the debris of our security overhaul. When my phone rang, it was a local number I did not recognize. Hazel Cooper, I answered, putting it on speaker so Riley could hear. Hi, Ms. Cooper, a cheerful woman's voice chirped. This is Brenda from Cumberland Title and Escrow. I am just calling to follow up on the file for the transfer on Pine Ridge Road. We are still missing the notarized affidavit of identity you promised to drop off. The room went dead silent. Riley stopped chewing her bagel. I am sorry, I said, my voice sounding very far away. What transfer? The transfer to the trust, Brenda said, her cheer faltering slightly. The Whitmore Family Trust I assumed it was you called last week to set up the quitclaim deed preparation, to transfer the title from Hazel Cooper to the trust. My vision blurred at the edges. A quitclaim deed. It was the fastest, dirtiest way to transfer property. If I signed a quitclaim deed to a trust that Kara controlled, I would legally be giving her the house. Brenda, I said, forcing the words through a throat that felt like it was closing up. Who opened this file? Well, you did, honey, Brenda said, sounding confused now. Or someone who said they were you. She had all the info: social security number, the date the property was purchased, the deed volume number. She said you wanted to move the asset into a trust for tax purposes before the, what did she call it? Before the liquidation event. Liquidation event. A sale. Brenda, I said, do not process that file. That was not me. That was an imposter. I am the owner of this property, and I have not authorized any transfer. I need you to flag that file for fraud immediately. Oh my God, Brenda gasped. I will put a hold on it right now. I will notify the title officer. Who was the contact person? Riley asked, leaning into the phone. Who dropped off the paperwork? She came in person, Brenda said. Blonde, very well dressed, said she was your sister acting as your courier because you were out of the country, but she said you would be coming in to sign the affidavit when you got back. She paid the filing fee in cash. I hung up the phone. I looked at Riley. The color had drained from her face, mirroring my own shock. She wasn't just going to mortgage it, Riley said softly. She was going to take the title. She was setting up a trust, probably with herself as the beneficiary, and she was going to forge your signature on a quitclaim deed to transfer the house to herself. Then she could sell it without you ever knowing until the new owner showed up. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening woods. The twist was so sharp it made me dizzy. I had thought this was about a kitchen. I had thought it was about credit cards, but it was so much bigger. Kara had not just been a squatter. She had been an active usurper. She had spent the last 3 months laying the groundwork to steal the only thing I truly owned. She had impersonated me to contractors, to banks, and now to a title company. She was going to sell my grandmother's house and pocket the equity, leaving me with nothing but a suitcase of dirty clothes and a ruined credit score. She is not just a thief, I said, turning back to Riley. She is a con artist, a real one. And she is desperate, Riley said. The only reason the title transfer didn't go through is because they needed that affidavit. She was probably planning to forge that too. But you came home early. You interrupted the closing act. If I had stayed in Germany for another 2 weeks, I realized, the horror washing over me, I would have come home to strangers living in my house, and I wouldn't have even legally owned it anymore. I looked at the new lock on the front door. It seemed flimsy now. We weren't just locking out a sister with boundary issues. We were locking out a criminal who had been one signature away from stealing a $500,000 asset. Call Dana, Riley said. Tell her about the escrow file. This isn't just theft anymore. This is real estate fraud. This is federal. I dialed the number. My hand steady now. The shock had burned off, leaving only a cold, hard clarity. Kara wanted a war. She wanted to play games with titles and deeds. Fine. I was about to show her what happens when you try to steal a house from a project manager who specializes in supply chain forensics. I was going to trace every inch of this paper trail, and I was going to use it to bind her hands so tight she would never sign her name again. The morning sun hit the living room floor, but it did not bring warmth. It only illuminated the battlefield. Riley had transformed my dining table into a war room. The surface, usually reserved for quiet breakfasts and coffee, was now covered in sticky notes, legal pads, and a laptop that hummed like an engine revving for a race. We were not just reacting anymore, we were offensive. Riley stood in front of the large sliding glass door, which she had turned into a makeshift whiteboard using dry erase markers she had brought from Chicago. She was writing in sharp, capitalized letters: Phase 1 containment, Phase 2, evidence lock, Phase 3 legal strike. Okay, Riley said, uncapping a red marker. We have stopped the bleeding on the credit cards. The freeze is active. Now we need to prioritize the triage. I have categorized the damage into 3 buckets: financial fraud, property damage, and identity theft. Each one needs a different handler. I sat on the sofa, clutching a mug of black coffee. My hands were steady for the first time in 24 hours. Seeing the chaos organized into lists made it feel manageable. It turned a family tragedy into a project, and projects were things I knew how to solve. Dana called while you were in the shower, Riley said, pointing to a note on the glass. She filed the petition for the emergency protective order this morning. She is citing the theft of sensitive documents, since Kara has your social security number and passport details. Dana argued that she poses an immediate and continuing threat to your livelihood. It is not just about physical safety, it is about financial survival. Did the judge sign it? I asked. Hearing is set for 2 o'clock, Riley replied. Dana is confident. She included the police report number and the affidavit from the bank. She is also asking for a clause that forces Kara to surrender any copies of your personal information immediately. If Kara keeps a photo of your passport on her phone after the order is served, she goes to jail for contempt. I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. What about the contractor, the one who thought I was selling the house? Detective Maddox is on that, Riley said, tapping another section of the glass. He is meeting with Mike from the cabinet company today. He is going to pull the physical contract with the forged signature. He is also subpoenaing the email logs from that fake management account Kara set up. We are going to prove she was impersonating you to vendors, not just using your money. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a number I did not recognize. I looked at Riley. She nodded. Answer it. Speaker. Do not say anything except hello. I picked up the phone. Hello. I cannot believe you locked me out. The voice was shrill, hysterical, and instantly recognizable. Kara. I had to sleep in my car. Hazel, she screamed. Do you have any idea how cold it is? I have no cash. My cards are declined because you froze everything. You are literally starving your own sister. I looked at Riley. She held up a finger, signaling me to wait. You stole $150,000. Kara, I said calmly. I told you I would pay it back, Kara yelled, her voice cracking. But now you have ruined everything. I was going to close a deal next week that would have covered half of it. You are so short-sighted. You destroyed my business before it even launched. You did not have a business, I said. You had a felony scheme. The tone on the other end shifted instantly. The hysteria vanished, replaced by a cold, venomous hiss. If you don't unlock those cards, she said, I am going to tell everyone about the illegal subletting you did in college. I will ruin your reputation at that fancy firm. I will tell Mom you hit me. I will make up so much dirt on you that you will spend the next 10 years in court for defamation. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a promise, she spat. Fix this, Hazel, or I will burn your life down. The line went dead. Riley let out a low whistle. She is spiraling. That was textbook narcissistic collapse. She realizes she has lost control, so she is cycling between playing the victim and being the aggressor. Did we get it? I asked. Riley pointed to her phone, which was recording. Every word. Dana is going to love that. I will make up so much dirt on you. That is an admission of malicious intent. Send that to Maddox immediately. It proves she is trying to extort you. I saved the recording and emailed it to the detective. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of combat. She had threatened to burn my life down, unaware that she had already lit the match, and I was the one holding the fire extinguisher. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made my stomach drop. Mom, I hesitated. Riley looked at me with soft eyes. You have to take this one, but remember, you are not her daughter right now. You are the plaintiff. I picked up. Hi, Mom? Hazel, honey. My mother's voice was wet and trembling. I just got off the phone with Kara. She sounds terrifying. She said she is stranded. She said she has no food. She is crying her eyes out. Kara is an adult. Mom, I said. She has a car. She has friends. She is not helpless. But she is your sister, Mom wailed. She made a mistake. Hazel, I know she spent some money she shouldn't have, but you can't treat her like a criminal. You can't just throw her away. She didn't just spend money, I said, keeping my voice level, fighting the urge to scream. She stole my identity. She tried to sell my house. She forged my signature on legal documents. That is not a mistake. That is a crime. She is just lost, Mom pleaded. She is jealous of you. She admires you. She wanted to be like you. Can't you see that imitation is flattery? She just went too far. Please, Hazel, drop the police report. I will help her pay you back. We can work out a payment plan. Just don't let them arrest her. It will kill your father's memory if his daughter goes to jail. The mention of Dad was a low blow, a precision strike at my guilt, but it didn't land the way she intended. Instead, it clarified things. Dad was a man of integrity. He would have been the first one to drive Kara to the police station himself. Mom, I said, and my voice surprised me with its steeliness. I am not doing this to her. She did this to herself. I do not control the law. I do not control the district attorney. I just told the truth. Whatever happens next is the consequence of her actions, not mine. You can stop it, Mom insisted, her voice hardening. You can withdraw the complaint. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding. If you don't, you are choosing money over family. No, I said. I am choosing truth over lies. I am sorry you feel that way. Mom, but I'm not stopping. I hung up before she could say anything else. I put the phone face down on the table. My hands were shaking again. Riley walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. That was the hardest part. The rest is just paperwork. They want you tired so you will give up. They want you to accept the abuse because it is easier than fighting. We are not playing by their rules anymore. I need air, I said. I need to check the rest of the property. I haven't even looked at the back deck yet. I will come with you, Riley said. We walked out through the sliding glass doors onto the expansive wooden deck that overlooked the valley. The air was crisp and smelled of pine needles. It should have been peaceful, but then I saw it. At the far end of the deck, where I used to have a simple set of Adirondack chairs, there was a monstrosity. It was a hot tub, a massive 6-person acrylic spa, bubbling away, steam rising into the cold mountain air. It was surrounded by a makeshift wooden enclosure that looked hastily constructed. "She bought a hot tub," I whispered. "Of course she bought a hot tub." Riley walked over to it. Her brow furrowed. She knelt down and looked at the base. "Hazel," she said, her voice sharp. "Come look at this." I walked over. Riley pointed to the decking boards underneath the massive tub. They were bowing. The wood was splintering under the immense weight. "This deck was not built for this load," Riley said, standing up and backing away. "A tub this size filled with water weighs nearly 5,000 pounds. You need reinforced pilings. You need a concrete pad. She just plopped it right on top of the cedar planks." I looked over the edge of the deck. The support posts were leaning slightly. The entire structure was compromised. "She is destroying the foundation," I realized. "If that thing falls through, it takes the back wall of the house with it." "We need a structural engineer," Riley said, pulling out her phone. "And we need to drain this thing immediately. This isn't just theft. This is destruction of property. It is negligence." I called Dana again. "Add it to the list," Dana said when I told her about the hot tub. "We are amending the civil complaint. We are not just asking for repayment of the stolen funds. We are asking for restoration costs. If we have to rebuild the deck, she pays for it. If the foundation is cracked, she pays for it. This proves she acted with reckless disregard for your property." "It proves she didn't care," I said. "She didn't care if the house collapsed as long as she got to soak in the bubbles." "It helps the criminal case, too," Dana noted. "It shows a pattern of entitlement and destruction. Maddox will want photos of the structural stress." By late afternoon, the mood in the cabin had shifted from frantic to focused. We had drained the tub using a siphon hose Riley found in the shed. We had photographed the bowed wood. We had logged every text message and every voicemail. Then, at 5 o'clock, Detective Maddox called. I put him on speaker. "Ms. Cooper," he said, and his tone was different. It was official, heavy. "I just left the district attorney's office." I held my breath. Riley stopped typing. "They have reviewed the evidence," Maddox said. "The video of her photographing your documents was the clincher. Combined with the forged contract from the cabinet maker and the statement from the title company about the attempted deed transfer, they are moving forward." "What are the charges?" I asked. "Identity theft in the first degree." Maddox recited. "Forgery, credit card fraud over $10,000, attempted theft of property over $250,000 regarding the deed. And because she used a computer to facilitate the crimes, they are tacking on a wire fraud charge." "Wire fraud," Riley whispered. "That is federal territory. The warrant is being typed up now." Maddox continued. "A judge will sign it first thing in the morning. We are going to pick her up. Do you know where she is?" "She told my mother she was driving to Atlanta," I said. "But she also said she didn't have gas money." "We will ping her phone," Maddox said. "We have enough for a location warrant now. We will find her. My guess? She is still in the county." People like this do not run far. They circle back to try to manipulate the victim again. Keep your doors locked. If she shows up, do not open the door. Call 911. "I understand," I said. 48 hours, Ms. Cooper," Maddox said. "Sit tight. It is almost over." I hung up. The silence returned to the cabin, but it felt different now. It was the silence of an impending judgment. I walked into the kitchen, the alien kitchen that Kara had built with my life savings. I ran my hand over the cold quartz counter. I looked at the spot where the $1,800 coffee maker had been. For years, I had tried to manage Kara. I had tried to fix her messes, pay her debts, and smooth over her rough edges so she could fit into the family picture. I had thought I was being a good sister. I had thought I was helping. But looking at the bowing deck and the red ink on my credit report, I realized I hadn't been helping. I had been feeding a beast. "You okay?" Riley asked from the doorway. "I will be," I said. I looked out the window at the darkening woods. Somewhere out there. Kara was likely sitting in her car, freezing, furious, and blaming me for her downfall. She was probably composing another text to Mom, another lie to a friend, another spin on the story where she was the martyr. But it didn't matter anymore. Her narrative was about to run into a wall of evidence. "This doesn't end with an apology," I said, turning back to Riley. "It doesn't end with a family meeting or a hug. It ends in a courtroom." I picked up the sticky note Riley had written earlier, Phase 3 legal strike. I moved it to the center of the glass door. "Let's get ready for trial," I said. The phone call from Detective Maddox came at 6 in the morning. Slicing through the thin, restless sleep I had managed to catch on the sofa, they had found her. Kara was not in Atlanta. She was in Chattanooga, holed up in the apartment of a man named Travis, a bartender she had been seeing on and off for 3 months, a relationship she had never mentioned to me. Likely because she knew I would ask how she was paying for the gas to drive to see him. Maddox did not mince words. The arrest had not been quiet. When the officers knocked, Kara had refused to open the door. When they finally gained entry with a warrant, she had not gone limp or cried in resignation. She had screamed. She had thrashed. She had yelled at the top of her lungs that she was being framed, that her jealous older sister was orchestrating a vendetta to destroy her reputation. She was dragged out in handcuffs, kicking at the officers, performing her victimhood for the neighbors who watched from their balconies. I should have felt relieved. The threat was contained. The locks I had installed were no longer the only thing standing between me and financial ruin. But as I dressed for the arraignment later that morning, pulling on a charcoal blazer that felt like armor, I felt nothing but a cold, hollow dread. Riley offered to drive, and I let her. I did not trust my hands on the wheel. The drive to the county courthouse was silent. The mountains passing by in a blur of green and gray. I was not going there to gloat. I was not going there to see her suffer. I was going because I needed to see the reality of it. I needed to see the mechanism of the law take hold of the chaos she had created and force it into a shape that made sense. I needed to know that the woman who stole my identity was actually subject to gravity, because for the last week, she had seemed to float above all consequences. The courtroom was a windowless box that smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. We sat in the second row, behind the prosecutor, a young woman with a sharp ponytail and a stack of files that looked reassuringly thick. My mother was not there. She had texted me earlier, saying she could not bear to see her baby in chains, a message that carried the silent accusation that I was the one who had put the chains on her. When the bailiff announced the next case, the side door opened. The air left the room. Kara walked in. She was wearing a county-issued orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. Her hair, usually blown out and perfect, was pulled back in a messy knot. Her face was scrubbed of makeup, revealing the pale, terrified skin beneath. She looked small. She looked young. For a split second, the instinct to protect her, the instinct that had cost me tens of thousands of dollars over the years, flared up in my chest. Then she saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and the expression on her face was a terrifying cocktail of emotions. There was pleading there, a desperate, wide-eyed look that begged me to stop this, to stand up and tell the judge it was all a big mistake. But beneath the pleading, there was a burning, molten hatred. It was the look of someone who truly believed they had been wronged. She did not look at me like a sister. She looked at me like a traitor. The judge, a man with a face carved from granite, peered over his glasses. "State versus Kara Marie Whitmore," he read. "Charges are as follows: 1 count of identity theft in the 1st degree, 1 count of forgery, 1 count of theft of property valued over $60,000, 1 count of credit card fraud, 1 count of attempted theft of real property regarding the fraudulent deed transfer, and 1 count of wire fraud." Hearing the list read aloud, in that flat, bureaucratic monotone, was physically painful. It was an inventory of my betrayal. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asked. Kara's public defender, a harried-looking man who had likely met her 5 minutes ago, stood up. "Not guilty, Your Honor. Of course, not guilty." She was standing there in a jumpsuit because she had systematically dismantled my life, Yet she still refused to own a single piece of it. The prosecutor stood up to argue bail. Your Honor, the state requests bail be set at $100,000 cash. The defendant has demonstrated a high flight risk. She was apprehended in another county attempting to evade arrest. Furthermore, she has access to the victim's sensitive identification documents, including passport information, which makes her a significant risk for further identity fraud. Your Honor, the defense attorney interrupted. My client is a local resident with strong family ties. She is currently experiencing a severe mental health crisis brought on by financial desperation. She is not a criminal mastermind. She is a young woman who made some frantic decisions during a period of instability. The victim is her sister. This is, at its core, a domestic dispute that has spiraled out of control. I gripped the wooden bench until my knuckles turned white. A domestic dispute. They were trying to minimize a six-figure theft into a sibling rivalry. The judge looked at Kara, then at the prosecutor. The allegations involve a calculated, multi-month scheme to defraud a family member and an attempt to liquidate real estate assets. This is not a dispute over a borrowed car. Bail is set at $75,000. Next case? The gavel banged. It was over in 4 minutes. Kara let out a sob as the bailiff took her arm. She turned back to look at me one last time. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just mouthed 2 words. You're dead. I froze. Riley, sitting next to me, stiffened. She had seen it too. We walked out of the courtroom into the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway. I felt nauseous. Seeing her like that, stripped of her pretenses, reduced to a number in the system, should have felt like justice. Instead, it felt like a funeral. My phone buzzed in my purse. Mom! I knew I shouldn't look. Riley warned me not to look. But I pulled the phone out anyway. You sat there. You sat there and watched them parade your little sister around in handcuffs like an animal. You watched them set a bail she can never pay. She's going to rot in a cell tonight because of you. Do you feel powerful? Hazel. Do you feel big? I hope that money keeps you warm at night. Because you don't have a family anymore. Are you even human? I stared at the screen. The words blurring through the tears I refused to shed. Am I human? I was the one who worked 80-hour weeks to buy that cabin. I was the one who built a credit score perfect enough to be stolen. I was the human who had been preyed upon. But in the twisted narrative of my family, the victim who fights back becomes the villain. Don't, Riley said, gently taking the phone from my hand. She is lashing out because she loses her enabler too. If Kara is in jail, Mom has to face the reality she created. We drove back to the cabin in silence. The adrenaline of the morning was fading, replaced by a crushing fatigue. I just wanted to go inside, lock the door, and sleep for a week, but the drama was not done with me yet. When we pulled up to the cabin, I saw something taped to the front door. It was a cream-colored envelope. I recognized the stationery. It was from the set Kara had bought with my credit card, the quiet luxury branding materials. How did that get here? I asked, my voice trembling. She is in jail. She must have left it before she ran, Riley said, her eyes scanning the woods. Or she had someone drop it off, probably the boyfriend. I walked up the steps and ripped the envelope off the wood. It was addressed to Hazel in Kara's distinctive, loopy calligraphy. I opened it right there on the porch. It was 3 pages long, single-spaced. Hazel, by the time you read this, you have probably already done something dramatic, because that is who you are. You love the drama. You love being the martyr. I am writing this because I know you will never let me explain myself in person. You are too busy judging me from your ivory tower. You think I stole from you. That is hilarious. You have so much. Hazel, you have more money than you know what to do with. You leave this house empty for months while I'm struggling to pay rent on a shoestring apartment. Did you ever once offer to let me stay there? No. You hoard it. You hoard your success like a dragon. I didn't steal. I redistributed. I was investing in us. I was fixing up the dump you bought so we could sell it and finally have enough money to be free. I was going to give you your share. I just needed to borrow the startup capital. But you couldn't see the vision. You never could. You just see rules and spreadsheets. You chose money over your own blood. You chose a credit score over your sister. I hope you are happy in that empty house with your perfect kitchen. Just remember, every time you turn on that faucet, you destroyed our family for it. Don't expect me to apologize. I did nothing wrong. I just tried to survive in a world that handed you everything and gave me nothing. Kara. I lowered the letter. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. There was no apology, not one word of regret, not one acknowledgement that she had forged my name, ruined my credit, or tried to sell my home. It was a manifesto of entitlement. She truly believed that my success was a personal insult to her, and that robbing me was a moral act of leveling the playing field. She is delusional, Riley said, reading over my shoulder. This is clinically insane, Hazel. Redistributed. She sounds like a cult leader. She believes it, I said softly. That is the scary part. She isn't lying to me. She has rewritten reality in her head, so that she is the hero. We went inside. I threw the letter on the dining table, the war room table. We need to send this to Dana, Riley said. This proves lack of remorse. It proves she felt entitled to the assets. It kills any "I made a mistake" defense. I scanned the letter and emailed it to Dana. 10 minutes later, Dana called. I got the letter, Dana said, her voice brisk. It is gold for the sentencing phase, if we get there. But Hazel, we have a new problem. What now? I asked, sinking onto the sofa. Did she escape? No, Dana said. Her lawyer just sent over a discovery packet. They are moving to dismiss the charges based on exculpatory evidence. What evidence? I asked. There is no evidence. She did it. They have an email, Dana said. It is dated 4 months ago. It is from an email address. Hazel, Cooper, private gmail.com, sent to Kara. The subject line is House in Reno. My heart stopped. I did not have an email address like that. Read it to me, I said. Dana cleared her throat. Kara, I know you are stressed about the apartment. Just go to the cabin. Stay as long as you need. And honestly, the place needs work. Feel free to update the kitchen and whatever else. Use the cards in the desk drawer. The code is 4491. Consider it an early inheritance distribution. I will deal with the bills when I get back. Love you. H. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a forgery, a digital fabrication designed to exonerate her completely. If a jury believed I sent that email, every charge, the theft, the fraud, the breaking and entering would vanish. It would become a consensual arrangement. I never wrote that, I said, my voice rising. That is not my email address, and I would never call my credit card PIN an inheritance distribution. I know, Dana said, but to a jury, it looks real. It explains why she had the PIN. It explains why she felt comfortable hiring contractors. It is a get-out-of-jail-free card. It is fake, I yelled. How can she just manufacture evidence like that? She is desperate, Dana said. But here's the thing about desperate people. They make mistakes. I looked at the metadata of the email they submitted. It is a printout, but the header information is visible. And the timestamp, Dana said. The email was allegedly sent on September 12th at 3 p.m, Eastern Standard Time. I frowned, thinking back. September 12th. Where was I? I was on a plane, I said, the memory clicking into place. I was flying from Singapore to Frankfurt. I was in the air for 14 hours. I did not have Wi-Fi. I remember specifically because I was angry that I couldn't check the logistics tracking for a shipment. Exactly, Dana said. And even if you had Wi-Fi, the IP address in the header, which she foolishly included in her fake printout, traces back to a residential ISP in Atlanta. Her apartment, I realized. She wrote the email to herself, Dana said. She created a fake account in your name, sent the email to herself from her own apartment, and then printed it out to show her lawyer. She framed herself for fabrication of evidence. I laughed. It was a dark, hysterical sound. Kara had tried to checkmate me, but she had moved her king into a direct line of fire. She just added another felony to the list. Didn't she? I asked. Perjury and tampering with Aiko's evidence, Dana confirmed. I am going to forward this to the prosecutor immediately. Maddox will likely be paying her another visit in her cell to add these to the charge sheet. But Hazel, you need to understand what this means. What does it mean? It means she is not going to stop, Dana said seriously. She is willing to lie to the court. She is willing to fabricate documents. She is going to fight this dirty until the very end. She is trying to gaslight the legal system the same way she gaslights you. I looked at the cream-colored letter on the table. You chose a credit score over your sister. Kara was not just a thief. She was an architect of false realities. She would burn the truth to the ground if it meant she could stand on the ashes and call herself a victim. Let her try, I said to Dana. She can forge emails. She can write letters. She can lie to Mom, but she cannot forge the flight logs from Singapore Airlines. She cannot forge the IP address logs. No, she can't, Dana agreed. We have her, Hazel. But brace yourself. When this evidence gets kicked out, she is going to realize she is cornered, and a cornered narcissist is the most dangerous thing on earth. I hung up the phone. Riley was watching me, her expression grim. She faked an email from me, I told her. She tried to prove I gave her permission. And she sent it from her own IP address while I was over the Pacific Ocean, I said. Riley shook her head, a mix of disgust and awe. She is pathological. She actually thinks she is smarter than the FBI. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the property. The cabin felt different now. It was no longer just a crime scene. It was a fortress, and I was the commander inside, holding the line against a siege that was no longer about money. It was about reality. Kara wanted to twist the world until she was the hero. She wanted to make me the villain who abandoned her. She wanted to make the theft into a gift. But I had the one thing she could not counterfeit. I had the truth, and I was going to use it to bury her. Riley, I said, turning back to the room. Don't order pizza tonight. Let's cook. I want to use this kitchen. I want to dirty the counters. I want to reclaim it. You want to cook in the sterile operating theater? Riley teased gently. I want to make it smell like onions and garlic and actual food, I said. I want to scrub the scent of her vanilla perfume out of the air. She doesn't live here anymore, and she is never coming back. I opened the $1,800 smart fridge, which was still empty because Kara hadn't bought groceries. Only champagne, and grabbed a bottle of water. I slammed the door shut with a satisfying thud. The fight was far from over. The trial would be brutal. My family would likely never speak to me again. But as I stood there, I felt a strange, quiet strength settling into my bones. I was Hazel Cooper. I solved problems for a living, and I had just solved the biggest problem of my life. The preliminary hearing was not held in the large, ceremonial courtroom where the arraignment had taken place. It was convened in a smaller, more utilitarian room that smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. The intimacy of the space made the tension worse. There was nowhere to look without seeing the back of Kara's head or the weeping profile of my mother, who sat in the front row clutching a tissue like a lifeline. I sat next to Dana, my hands folded on the table to hide the fact that they were cold as ice. Today was not about bail. Today was about probable cause. Today, the state had to prove that this was not a misunderstanding between sisters, but a calculated series of felonies worthy of a trial. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Sterling, wasted no time. She did not start with emotional arguments. She started with the video. Your Honor, Ms. Sterling said, tapping her tablet. The defense has characterized the defendant's actions as an authorized use of family funds. We would like to present Exhibit A, taken from the security camera in the victim's hallway. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The room went silent. There was Kara, projected in high definition. We watched her sit on the floorboards of my hallway. We watched her pull the red accordion folder from the drawer. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, suffocating. Every person in the room watched my sister meticulously arrange my passport, my social security card, and my emergency credit card on the floor. We saw the flash of her phone camera. Flip, flash, flip, flash. It was mechanical. It was predatory. I heard my mother gasp behind me. A wet, choking sound. She had refused to believe it when I told her. Now, she was watching it happen. Kara, sitting at the defense table, did not look at the screen. She stared at her hands, her shoulders hunched, shrinking into her orange jumpsuit. "This is not borrowing," Ms. Sterling said, pausing the video right as Kara photographed the security code on the back of the card. "This is data mining." The defendant was harvesting the victim's identity to bypass security protocols that she knew were in place. The prosecutor then called Mike, the contractor. He looked uncomfortable in his button-down shirt, clearly wishing he was back on a job site. "Did the defendant identify herself as Hazel Cooper, Ms.?" Sterling asked. "Yes, ma'am," Mike said, looking at Kara with a mixture of confusion and anger. "She said she was the owner. She signed the contract as Hazel Cooper. I never would have torn out a 60-year-old kitchen if I knew she was just house-sitting." "And did she discuss the future of the property?" "She asked about flip value," Mike testified. "She wanted to know what finishes would help it sell fastest. She asked for a timeline of under 30 days. The defense attorney tried to object, claiming hearsay, but the judge overruled him. The picture was becoming clear. This was not a renovation, it was a liquidation. Then came the financial investigator. He set up a chart on an easel. It looked like a map of a disease spreading. "We analyzed the defendant's financial interactions with the victim over the last 5 years, the investigator explained, pointing to a series of small red dots on the timeline. "Here, 4 years ago, a gas station charge of $40 on a card the victim rarely used. Here, 3 years ago, a small personal loan of $2,000 taken out in the victim's name and paid off quickly to avoid detection. This is a classic testing pattern. The defendant was probing the victim's credit monitoring systems. He then pointed to the massive red block at the end of the timeline. When the victim left the country," he said, "the testing phase ended. The extraction phase began. In 90 days, the defendant accessed 7 different credit lines and attempted to secure a home equity line of credit. This was a premeditated escalation." I felt a chill run down my spine. Detective Maddox had been right. I wasn't a sister to her. I was a resource. I was a vein of gold she had been mining with a pickaxe for years. And when I left for Germany, she had brought in the dynamite. But the real blow to Kara's defense came from a witness I did not expect to see. The side door opened, and Travis walked in. Kara's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. This was the boyfriend, the bartender from Chattanooga who had been harboring her when she was arrested. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit, and he looked terrified. He walked to the stand, avoiding Kara's gaze entirely. "Mr. Travis," Mrs. Sterling said, "can you tell the court what the defendant told you regarding the cabin in Townsend?" Travis cleared his throat, shifting nervously in the chair. "She told me it was her place. Well, she said it was practically hers. She said her sister, that is Hazel over there, was never coming back from Europe. She said Hazel was going to stay overseas for work and that she was going to take over the property. Did she mention how she was going to take it over?" "Yeah," Travis mumbled. "She said she had the papers. She said something about a trust. She told me, 'Once I get the deed filed, the house is mine, and Hazel can't touch me.' She bragged about it. She said she was going to sell it and we could move to Nashville and open a club." Kara let out a strangled noise. Half sob, half scream. "You liar, I never said that." "Order," the judge barked, banging the gavel. "Counsel, control your client." Kara slumped back, shaking. The betrayal was absolute. Travis had turned on her to save himself from being charged as an accomplice. He had just confirmed the intent to steal the title. It wasn't just fraud anymore. It was a hostile takeover. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I swore to tell the truth. "Ms. Cooper, the prosecutor asked softly, can you describe how you felt when you entered your home? I took a breath. I looked at Kara. She was glaring at me now, the tears gone, replaced by that familiar toxic heat. I felt violated, I said, my voice steady. It wasn't just the money. Money is just numbers. I can earn money back. It was the erasure. She threw away my grandmother's quilt. She repainted the walls. She took my clothes and put them in trash bags. She didn't just want to live there. She wanted to replace me. She wanted my life, my house, my credit score, but she didn't want the work that went into getting them. The defense attorney stood up for cross-examination. He was a slick man with a practiced sneer. Ms. Cooper, he started, pacing in front of me. You are a very successful woman, aren't you? You make a significant salary. I work hard, I said. And you have always controlled the family finances, haven't you? He pressed. You have always been the one with the power. Isn't it true that your sister has struggled with mental health and employment? Isn't it true that you have bailed her out before? I have helped her, I corrected. So isn't it possible, he said, leaning in, that this was just another instance of her asking for help, and you, the controlling older sister, decided to punish her because she didn't ask politely enough? You left the key for her mother. You knew she had access. Did you ever explicitly tell her, Kara, do not renovate the kitchen? It was a trap. He was trying to blame the victim for not setting better boundaries against the predator. No, I said, meeting his eyes. I did not tell her not to renovate the kitchen. I also did not tell her not to burn the house down. Some things are implied by the law and by common decency. I did not give her permission to impersonate me. I did not give her permission to steal $150,000. But you are sisters, he pushed. Families share assets. Families do not forge signatures, I shot back. And families do not try to sell each other's homes while they are out of the country. I stepped down. I felt Dana squeeze my arm as I sat back down. Good, she whispered. You held the line. The judge called for a recess before ruling. I walked out into the hallway, needing air. The hallway was a minefield. My family was there. My cousins, aunts, and uncles were clustered in small groups, whispering. When I appeared, the conversation died. Some of them looked away, refusing to meet my eye. I could feel their judgment. To them, I was the one breaking the code. I was the one dragging private business into the public square. But then, my phone buzzed. A text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I am not supposed to say this, but good for you. She stole money from my mom last year too. We just never reported it. Stay strong. I looked up and caught her eye across the hall. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod before turning back to her mother. The cracks in Kara's facade were spreading. I wasn't the only victim. I was just the first one loud enough to scream. Then, Aunt Linda approached me. Linda was my mother's older sister, a woman who usually stayed out of the drama. She looked tired. She was holding a manila envelope. Hazel, she said quietly. Aunt Linda, I said, bracing myself for a lecture on forgiveness. I sat in there, she said, gesturing to the courtroom doors. I watched that video. I watched her taking pictures of your cards. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Your mother is in denial, Linda said. She thinks this is just a phase. But I know what this is. I saw your grandmother deal with your grandfather's gambling debts. I know what financial ruin looks like. She handed me the envelope. What is this? I asked. I found it in your grandmother's Bible, Linda said. I have been holding on to it since the funeral, waiting for the right time. I think you need it now. I opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of yellowed stationery, covered in my grandmother's shaky cursive. To my Hazel, I am leaving the cabin to you, and only to you. I love all my grandchildren, but I know Kara. She has a hole in her heart that she tries to fill with things. If she gets the cabin, she will sell it for a quick $1. You are the keeper. You are the one who loves the mountain. Promise me you will keep it safe. It is your sanctuary, and yours alone. I felt tears prick my eyes. Grandma knew, even back then. She knew. Can I use this? I asked Linda. It is the truth, Linda said. Use it. We went back into the courtroom. Dana took the letter, her eyes widening as she read it. Your Honor, Dana said when the session resumed, we have one final piece of evidence regarding the defense's claim of community family property. She read the letter aloud. The words echoed in the small room. She has a hole in her heart she tries to fill with things. If she gets the cabin, she will sell it. It was a voice from the grave, validating everything I had said. It dismantled the idea that the cabin was a family free-for-all. It was a specific, protected bequest. The judge looked at Kara. Kara was staring at the table, her face pale. She knew that letter. She knew Grandma had seen right through her. The evidence presented today, the judge began, his voice booming, establishes a clear and disturbing pattern. We have video evidence of identity theft. We have witness testimony of intent to defraud the title. We have a financial forensic trail of long-term theft. And we have testimony that the defendant planned to liquidate the victim's assets for personal gain. He paused, looking directly at the defense table. The defense's argument that this is a domestic misunderstanding is rejected. This was a hostile, criminal enterprise. Furthermore, given the attempt to transfer the deed and the fabrication of the email evidence discussed in chambers, the court finds the defendant to be a significant danger to the financial safety of the community. Bail remains at $75,000, the judge ruled, and I am adding a condition. If the defendant makes bail, she is to have no access to the internet and is to be placed on GPS monitoring. Probable cause is found on all charges. We are moving to trial. The gavel banged. Kara stood up, her legs shaking. She looked back at Mom, wailing. Mom, do something. Don't let them take me. Mom was sobbing, burying her face in her hands. But she didn't stand up. She didn't offer to pay the bail. She couldn't. Kara had stolen from everyone, and the reality was finally setting in. There was no money left to save her. I walked out of the courtroom. The air in the hallway felt cooler, cleaner. I didn't look back at Kara as the bailiff led her away. I didn't look at my mother. I walked out the front doors of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunshine of the Tennessee afternoon. I took a deep breath. I had spent my whole life trying to be the good sister, the protector, the fixer. I had thought that if I just gave enough, forgave enough, and covered enough debts, Kara would eventually change. But standing on the concrete steps, I realized that the only person who could change Kara was Kara, and the only person who could save Hazel was Hazel. I had the letter in my purse. You are the keeper. Grandma had written, I was the keeper. I was the keeper of the truth. I was the keeper of the cabin, and for the first time in months, I felt like the keeper of my own life. Ready to go? Riley asked, stepping up beside me. Yes, I said. Let's go home. I have a deck to fix. I didn't need them to understand anymore. I didn't need their forgiveness. The law had spoken, and for once, the verdict was exactly what it needed to be. The trial lasted 4 agonizing days. A slow-motion dissection of my family's collapse played out under the hum of fluorescent lights. The prosecutor, Ms. Sterling, did not resort to theatrics. She did not need to. She built the case like a bricklayer, placing one fact on top of another until the wall of evidence was so high that Kara could not climb over it. She started with the intrusion, the physical act of entering a home that was not hers. Then she layered on the data mining, the systematic photographing of my passport and social security card. Then came the spending, the $58,000 on a kitchen I did not want, the luxury clothes, the spa treatments, and finally, the crown jewel of the prosecution's case, the attempted theft of the deed itself. It was a domino effect of betrayal, each piece falling with a heavy, inevitable clack. The courtroom was packed. My family sat in the rows behind the defense table, a silent, tense block of people torn between the reality they were seeing and the loyalty they had been taught to uphold. On the third day, the state played the video again. It was the same clip from the preliminary hearing, but seeing it in the context of the full trial gave it a new, terrifying weight. The jury watched in silence as Kara sat on my hallway floor, meticulously documenting my identity like a spy in a Cold War thriller. There was no sound in the video, but the silence in the courtroom was deafening. It stripped away every excuse Kara had made. You do not photograph the back of a credit card by accident. You do not photograph a Social Security card to be helpful. Kara took the stand on the fourth day. It was a desperate Hail Mary by the defense, a gamble that her tears could wash away the facts. She wore a soft cardigan instead of the orange jumpsuit, her hair brushed into a modest style. She looked at the jury with wide, wet eyes. "I was just so desperate," she sobbed, clutching a tissue. "I lost my apartment. I had nowhere to go. I thought Hazel would want me to be safe. I thought we were partners. I was going to pay her back every cent once the business took off. I never meant to hurt anyone. She was good. I had to give her that." For a moment, I saw a few jurors soften. They saw a weeping younger sister. Not a felon, but then Ms. Sterling stood up for cross-examination. "Ms. Whitmore," Sterling said, her voice dangerously calm. "You claim you were desperate and only wanted a safe place to live. Is that correct?" "Yes," Kara sniffed. "Then can you explain to the jury why, if you were destitute, you applied for a $150,000 home equity line of credit in your sister's name?" Kara froze. The tears stopped instantly. I was going to invest it," she stammered. "Invest it in what Sterling pressed. In the business that did not exist. And why did you attempt to transfer the deed of the house into a trust you controlled? Is stealing a house a requirement for finding a safe place to sleep?" Kara's eyes darted around the room. She looked at her lawyer, but he was staring at his notes. "I was just trying to secure the asset," Kara snapped, her mask slipping. "Hazel is never there. She doesn't appreciate the property." Someone had to take charge. The change in her tone was visceral. The jury recoiled. In 2 seconds, she had gone from a weeping victim to an entitled usurper. She had admitted that she felt she had the right to take my home because I was not using it the way she thought I should. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged schoolteacher, stood up. "We find the defendant, Kara Marie Whitmore, guilty on the charge of identity theft in the first degree, guilty on the charge of credit card fraud, guilty on the charge of forgery, guilty on the charge of attempted theft of real property." The word guilty rang out like a bell. 4 times. Kara did not scream this time. She slumped in her chair, looking as if the strings holding her up had been cut. Behind me, I heard my mother let out a low, keen wail, a sound of pure heartbreak. My aunt put an arm around her, but the rest of the family sat stone-faced. The illusion was gone. The truth was now a matter of public record. The sentencing hearing was held 2 days later. The prosecutor asked for prison time, citing the premeditated nature of the crime and the lack of remorse. The defense pleaded for leniency, asking for probation and community service, arguing that destroying a young woman's life would only further fracture the family. The judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood up. I walked to the podium. My hands were shaking, but my voice was not. I did not look at Kara. I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," I began. "For the last 6 months, I have been told by people I love that I should forgive my sister. I have been told that family matters should be settled at the dinner table. Not in a courtroom, but this was not a family matter. This was an invasion." I took a breath, gripping the sides of the wooden podium. My home is the one place where I'm supposed to be safe. It is the one place where I can close the door and be Hazel, not a project manager, not a fixer, not a bank for my relatives. Kara did not just steal my money. She stole that safety. She walked into my sanctuary and sold it off piece by piece. She looked at my life and decided it was a resource for her to harvest. And even now, after all the evidence, after the video, after the verdict, she is not sorry she did it. She is only sorry she got caught. I am asking for a sentence that reflects the reality of her actions, not the fantasy of her excuses. When I sat down, the room was silent. The judge nodded. He looked at Kara, who was staring at the table, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. "Kara Whitmore," the judge said, "you have shown a breathtaking level of entitlement and deceit. You betrayed the trust of the person who has supported you the most. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated betrayal designed to strip your sister of her assets and her security." He adjusted his glasses and read the sentence. "I hereby sentence you to 48 months in a state correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $158,000. You are also required to complete a mandatory financial responsibility program and undergo court-ordered cognitive behavioral therapy." 4 years. Kara's head snapped up. 4 years, she gasped. "But I can't go to prison," the gavel banged. The bailiff moved in. This time, the handcuffs clicked with a finality that silenced the room. I walked out of the courtroom, feeling lightheaded. It was over. The legal war was done, but the emotional war had one final battle. My mother was waiting for me in the hallway. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face a mask of grief and fury. She did not look like the woman who used to bake me birthday cakes. She looked like a stranger. "You happy now?" she hissed, her voice trembling. "You sent your sister to prison. 4 years. Hazel, she will be 40 when she gets out. You took her life away. She took her own life away." "Mom," I said quietly, "I just stopped letting her take mine too. I will never forgive you for this." My mother said. The words were heavy, designed to crush me. "You destroyed this family. Do not call me. Do not come to Christmas. As far as I'm concerned, I have one daughter, and she is in a cell because of you." I looked at her. For years, I would have begged. I would have apologized. I would have written a check to fix it. But looking at her now, I realized that the relationship she was mourning was one where I was the silent victim and Kara was the golden child. That relationship was already dead. "I don't need you to understand right now," I said, my voice calm and even, "and I don't need you to forgive me. I just need the truth to stand up on its own." And today, it did. I walked past her, down the long marble hallway, and out into the sunlight. I did not look back. The next week, I returned to the cabin. The first thing I did was hire a local contractor, a man named Tom who understood old houses. "I want the kitchen gone." I told him, all of it, Tom asked, looking at the gleaming white quartz and the $1,800 smart fridge. "This is high-end stuff." "Ma'am." "Sell it." I said. "Donate it. I don't care. Just get it out of my house." It took 2 weeks. I watched them tear out the sterile white cabinets. I watched them pry up the cold slate tiles. I used the money from selling Kara's appliances, which was a fraction of what she paid, but still something to buy reclaimed heart pine for the floors. I found a local carpenter to build cabinets out of warm, honey-colored oak, similar to what my grandfather had installed, but with better hinges. I did not try to recreate the past perfectly. That was impossible. But I built a kitchen that felt like me. I bought a simple coffee maker that cost $40 and made excellent coffee. I put my grandmother's cast-iron skillets back on the wall. I bought a new rug for the living room, a hand-woven wool one that smelled like earth and comfort. I kept one thing from Kara's reign of terror. I kept the receipt for the smart fridge. I framed it and hung it on the inside of the pantry door. It was a reminder that I had survived, a reminder that the price of my peace was high, but I was willing to pay it. On a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the sentencing, I walked out onto the back deck. We had reinforced the pilings and removed the hot tub, replacing the damaged boards. Now, there were just 2 simple wooden chairs and the vast, open view of the Smoky Mountains. The sun was setting, casting a purple and gold bruise across the sky. The mist was beginning to rise from the valley floor, drifting through the trees like a slow, silent river. I sat down in one of the chairs with a mug of tea. The silence was absolute. There was no hum of expensive electronics. There was no anxious checking of bank apps. There was just the wind and the birds settling in for the night, for the first time in months. My chest did not hurt. The knot of anxiety that had lived between my ribs was gone. I thought about Kara, sitting in a cell, likely still telling herself a story where she was the victim. I thought about my mother, sitting in her house, nursing her grudge. I felt a pang of sadness, sharp and familiar. I missed the idea of a family. I missed the fantasy that we were all on the same team. But then I took a sip of tea and looked at the mountain. This was my home. I had fought for it. I had stood in a courtroom and demanded that my reality be respected. I had lost people I loved, but I had found the person I had abandoned years ago. I had found myself. I leaned back in the chair, watching the first star appear above the ridge. The air was cold, but I was not shivering. I was warm. I was safe. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please subscribe to the channel Helena Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.